Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we can gain competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back with another great show that we have for you all this evening. Of course, we are working once again live in conjunction with Beacon Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African centered news and information. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit that notification bell as well for future videos. This is the first of the inaugural show of our Pan African Leadership Series, past, present, and future, where today we're going to be citing the work and the life and the legacy of Reverend Mojola Agbebi, of course, from Nigeria. We'll get a little bit deeper into who he is and why he matters. And then, of course, we're going to look to actually see how we can expand his work, right? So once again, family, if you're watching the dual stream live, LumumbaSpeaks.com, Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire in the home of African-centered news and information. This is the first of our Pan-African Leadership Series, past, present, and future. And today we're going to, of course, be identifying and discussing the life and legacy of a great Pan-Africanist, Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. And so one of the things that we want to do with this series is look at what can we learn from past Pan-African leaders that we can utilize today to make the world better for African people. So, family, if you are looking forward to this show, definitely put a 1 in the chat. If you're looking forward to the show, put a 1 in the chat. If you're familiar with Reverend Agbebi, you can put a 1 in the chat as well. If you're unfamiliar, you could put a 2 in the chat. And so, once again, I want to make you all aware, as you always know, the link is in the description. The link will be in the chat momentarily. But before we get started, I want to make sure that we go over some ground rules here at Lumumba Speaks and, of course, Beacon Network. Diversity of thought is welcome. So, irrespective of you on the left, you're on the right, or you're a centrist right down the middle, your perspective is welcome. Once again, no racial epithets of any kind are allowed. No epithets of any kind are allowed. This is, of course, a space for Black empowerment. We believe in 3 years of Black power, which are self-respect, self-defense, and, of course, self-determination. And so we want to honor that and make sure that we aren't engaging in epithets of any kind. We do not want to perpetuate harm against anyone, let alone against our own people. Number 3, facts over feelings. So if you have a disagreement, we want you to make sure that you are attacking the argument a person is making rather than the person itself. And then, of course, last but not least, no, keyword, no fundamentally false statements. You can have an opinion, right? You could give your view on an issue, but you can't make a fundamentally false statement. I oftentimes use the term patently false statement. And I always give the example, you can be someone who believes that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player who ever walked the earth, right? But you can't make a statement such as he's the best basketball player ever because Michael Jordan only won 4 championships. That would be an example of a fundamentally false statement. We all know Michael Jordan won 6 championships and he won 6 finals MVP. So we want to make sure that we're not making fundamentally false statements because, of course, that hurts the legitimacy of the platform. And, of course, it hurts my reputation as well as a professional and as a scholar. Last but not least, family, our goal here at Lumumba Speaks and Beacon Network, our mission is neither to exonerate or vilify, but to simply challenge conventional wisdom, to re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. So once again, family, we're seeking to simply re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. As I said before, this is the first, and I believe will maybe even be a year-long Pan-African Leadership Series, past, present, and future. We're here to identify and discuss the life and legacy of great Pan-African leaders of the past, while also reviewing what can we learn from them and utilize today to make the world better for African people. So today we're going to be discussing Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. He was born April 10th, 1860 as David Brown Vincent in Western Nigeria. He was a leading proponent of Ethiopianism, which advocated for an African-centered Christianity. In the 1880s, as an indication of his embrace of African culture, he changed his name to Mojola Agbebi. In 1888, Agbebi was a founder of the Native Baptist Church, now First Baptist Church, in Lagos, Nigeria. Later that year, he helped establish the Ebenezer Baptist Church in that city, Agbebi was one of the first Africans to hold a degree in civil engineering from a British university, but he was primarily known for his missionary work in southern Nigeria and in Cameroon between 1890 and 1910. Dr. Agbebi transitioned to the realm of the ancestors in 1917. And so what we really want to look at and really to do a deeper dive on is taking a look at Ethiopianism. What is it, and how that could be possibly beneficial to African people today? Just want to give a brief background. One of the reasons why Ethiopianism even came into fruition was due to the racism that African people were facing in the Anglican church in Africa, right? And we even saw there being a glass ceiling in terms, a racialized glass ceiling in terms of leadership in the church. And so, of course, we see the issues that African people were facing in the Christian church on the continent were the same issues that African people were facing in the Christian church here in the United States. This is why Richard Allen was, if I remember correctly, if I'm citing history correctly, created the first African American denomination in the United States, Christian denomination in the United States, once again, because of the racism that they were facing in the white churches, right? So just want to make sure we provide a brief background regarding why Ethiopianism came to be. So Ethiopianism, family, was not an ideology per se, or a theological or a political program. It was rather a cluster of ideas and traditions about being Christian in Africa that was shared by a group of African leaders in the period from 1890 to 1920. These ideas and traditions focus on the history of Africa before European colonization and taught Afro-Atlantic teachings, meaning they brought together the religious ideas of both Europeans and Africans. So we're talking about maybe a form of cultural synchronism. There was no short boundary to the movement, but it shaded off into other groups. Features of Ethiopian movement included the use of the name Ethiopia, Ethiopian, Kush or Kushite in the names of churches, the aim of a united African Christianity. There was an aim of a united African Christianity based on the idea that Ethiopia shall stretch out its hands to God. We see this, of course, with Garvey and Garveyism and UNIA. In spite of many of the schisms, the Ethiopianist leaders formed a network and interacted with each other more than they did with leaders of other traditions. So this was part of the brand of what Ethiopianism was. So the question I have, of course, we'll be looking at this Pan-African Leadership Series, past, present, and future. And of course, we're citing the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. Is an African-centered Christianity needed for African people today? So I'm going to put the link in the chat. Of course, we can put that question in the chat. I definitely want to hear from you all. We talk about making the world better for African people. Is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today? So that's the question that we're posing to the audience. First question of our inaugural live on Pan-African Leadership Series, past, present, and future. So the question is out there, family, is in the chat. The link is in the chat as well. Is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today? Many would argue that Black liberation theology, we know the theological frame of reference created and coined by Dr. James Cone. Many would argue that that would be an example. Many would look at Dr. Jeremiah Wright, right? The church that he built in Chicago, I believe on the South Side, would be an example of African-centered Christianity. But definitely tap in, family. Want to get you all's thoughts. Once again, past, present, and future, Pan-African Leadership Series, PALS. And of course, we want to look at some of the work that our great ancestors did years ago, right? And how are we able to apply many of their ideas and concepts today to make a better world for African people? So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link, is in the chat. And we want to take this time to unpack, right, and learn from the past, take a Sankofa moment. But the question that I'm posing to you all is there a need? Is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? Of course, many of you are aware that we've done several shows on the anti-Black nature or anti-African nature of Abrahamic religions. We might even tie that, seek to extrapolate and focus on even Eastern religions that we tend to find there being a robust level of anti-blackness. Think of Hinduism, for example. But of course, the conversation for today is, of course, Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. Of course, he was one of the primary and earliest proponents of Ethiopianism and African-centered Christianity. And one of the goals that they were seeking to push back against in the white Anglican Church was this concept and idea that African people did not have a history, did not have a culture prior to, of course, European incursion on the continent. So that is something to be knowledgeable of as well. So this is what you can argue was an intrepid rebuff of course, the Eurocentric perspectives of the Christian church, white Christian church in colonial Africa. We know, if you cite the work of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, right, in his autobiography, talks about how when they were going to the missionary schools, it wasn't truly a Christian education that they were receiving, rather than European indoctrination, right? So, with that being said, family, these are some of the parameters, of course, in terms of us having this conversation. But definitely want to hear from you all. Of course, the first question that we're posing in the Pan African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, is there a need for African centered Christianity today? Of course, we're discussing, of course, the work of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi, who, of course, was from Western Nigeria, and many would argue Yoruba land. And one of the things that we find um, in Ethiopianism is this concept of having an African-centered frame of reference for Christianity, where the focus, of course, on Ethiopia. We know Ethiopia is the only African nation that never been colonized, and of course, it's been a Christian nation since, I believe, the 4th or 5th century, right? So definitely want to hear from you all, family. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. If you're watching on Twitter, I could put the link in on Twitter in the comments, but you're more than welcome to, of course, tap in and be part of the conversation here on YouTube at Lumumba Speaks and or Bequaline Network. So just want to make you all aware that those options are available if you want to be part of the conversation, right? Part of the conversation. We also know, I know many of you may be gearing up for the election that's coming up here in a week, actually. So we're a week from election day. So definitely looking forward to hearing from you all. We know you all may be aware that we're going to be doing a live election watch party on this platform, Lumumba Speaks. So definitely want to make sure that you are there for that. But the question, of course, remains, family, is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today for African people? Right. So definitely want to hear from you all. Tap in, be part of the conversation here at Lumumba Speaks and Bequaline Network, the home of African-centered news and information. Right. Pan-African social media extraordinaire. So, excuse me, for those of you who are watching on X, formerly known as Twitter, I've put the link to the chat. I'll put the link in the comments on Twitter. So if you want to tap in, be part of the conversation and share, give your thoughts, you can. Once again, family, you do not have to cam up if you want to join the conversation, and you can use a pseudonym. You know, many people want to maintain anonymity for admitted reasons. That's quite all right. And you do not have to cam up if you want to, of course, protect your identity. But we would love for you to be part of the conversation. This is, of course, the first in a series of shows we're going to be doing in our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. And of course, we're going in alphabetical order, family. So don't think this is an issue where we're picking a man over a woman. We're just simply going in alphabetical order. And of course, the first individual is Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. And of course, we're seeking to really interrogate his work, but also expand on it and see how the work of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi can actually make a better world for African people. So, and his work focused primarily on Ethiopianism, right? This was a response to the Eurocentric and oftentimes anti-Black and even dehumanizing and debilitating, particularly psychologically, and even, I would even argue spiritually or theologically, a position of the white Anglican Church and in Africa, on the African continent, during, of course, the dysphoria of colonialism. So definitely want to hear from you all regarding, is there a need, keyword, is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? Many of you may be aware of Dr. James Cone and, of course, of Black Liberation Theology. In fact, family, if you are familiar with Dr. James Cone and his work on Black liberation theology, put a 1 in the chat. If you are unfamiliar with the work of Dr. Cone, put a 2 in the chat if you're unfamiliar with Black liberation theology, or put a 1 in the chat if you are familiar with Black liberation theology. And of course, I'm just going off the head. I haven't reviewed the literature in quite some time, but I would argue that Black liberation theology posits not only having a Black minded or Black centered, African centered view of Christianity, similar to Ethiopianism, but also that there needs to be a social justice component to the work that is done by the church, right? And so the goal is not only to save one's soul, but also better the community as well. There's a lot of literature that actually, I believe, derives from Black liberation theology. I will call it as a book by, golly, I don't think I'm gonna be able to grab the book, but there's a book titled by Obery M. Hendricks. Right, that's the name of the book, by Obery M. Hendricks. Let me see if I can bring him up very quickly. Yes, he's an American writer. He's a brother, and he wrote a book, and a theologian, and he wrote a book titled, yes, The Politics of Jesus, Rediscovering the True Revolutionary Nature of Jesus' Teachings and How They've Been Corrupted. And what he argues in the text in his book is that Jesus' primary teaching was treating people's needs as holy, right? And so that revolves around a social justice aspect as well, in terms not only the material needs, but also the political, social, and even economic needs of the people that you're seeking to serve, right? And so begs the question, is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today? We could argue in terms of African-centered Christianity that we are able to incorporate concepts and ideas of Black liberation theology as well. So once again, family, if you're watching, put a 1 in the chat if you're familiar with Black liberation theology. Put a 2 in the chat if you're unfamiliar with Black liberation theology. Max, peace. Appreciate you tapping in. Hopefully you can tap in to be part of the conversation. As you know, Max, you do not have to cam up, and you do not have to use your actual name to be part of the conversation. This is the first video in a series. So, okay, you're saying you're unfamiliar with Black liberation theology, but of course, hopefully you can tap in, answer the question, is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today in the 21st century African world? So once again, family, this is the first video in the Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. And of course, we're citing the life, legacy, and work of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. Once again, family, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, as well as the notification bell for future videos. You're watching, of course, Lumumba Speaks, the Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, Beacon Line Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home, keyword the home, of African-centered news and information here on YouTube. So definitely, family, want to hear from you all regarding this question. I know many may be unaware of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi. Of course, I was unaware of him until about a week ago when I started gathering information, of course, for this series that we're going to be doing. However, I think it's important that we unpack, not only have reverence for leaders of the past, but also interrogate their work and actually look to see what can we learn from them and, of course, apply today. I think that's part of the concept of Sankofa, right? To return and retrieve that which you have lost, right? And we know for many of us, unfortunately, this is our culture, our history, our heritage, and use that to move forward in the future. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. If you're watching on Twitter, I've put the link to join the conversation in the comments on Twitter. Want to hear from you all. Is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today? And of course, family, this is opinion-based. This is in a situation where, this is a question where I'm asking someone to provide a fact, right? But simply your opinion. Is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today? You can say yes, you can say no. You can say we need to return to traditional African religions, so on and so forth, right? We just briefly did a show on introduction to African religions on Sunday. So this is an opinion-based question, family. So there is no right or wrong answer. Just definitely want to hear from the community regarding this issue. So once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. This is the first video of our first show of our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. And of course, we're looking at the life, work, and legacy of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi, who was one of the leading and early proponents of Ethiopianism also known as African Christianity, and with a focus on, of course, Ethiopia. So tap in, be part of the convo. And of course, we can extrapolate the concept of African-centered Christianity to, of course, the work of Dr. James Cone, and that work is Black Liberation Theology. So definitely tap in, family. The link is in the chat. The link is in the description. I want to hear from you all. Once again, the first video in our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi, right, from Western Nigeria, one of the leading proponents of Ethiopianism, also known as African-centered Christianity. Want to hear from you all. As once again, as you may be aware, if you're just tuning in, I did give some of the background regarding why there was a push for Ethiopianism. Of course, we know it wasn't a particular ideology or even theological school of thought, but it came as a rise due to the Eurocentric and anti-Black, anti-African, and discriminatory practices of the Anglican Church in Africa, right? Colonial Africa. We know there was a racialized glass ceiling in which if you were African, you were unable to actually be in a position of leadership in the Anglican Church. So this is something that we even saw on the African continent. So I'm sorry, not on the African continent, but even in the United States with Richard Allen, right? And so that's why they created their own denomination. I believe with the African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME. So we, of course, see the ubiquitous nature of anti-Blackness. That we know that it's intransigent, it's ubiquitous, and it's omnipresent. So irrespective of where we are as a people, we find that we are typically facing the same issues. If we're talking about apartheid in South Africa, the American derivative or the American kind of idea of apartheid is Jim Crow, Jim and Jane Crow, right? So we tend to find that irrespective of where we are as a people, we're facing the same issues, right? So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. And this, of course, is an opinion-based conversation. This is not a situation where we're asking for a fact, right? But the question that we're asking, family, is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? If so, what does that look like? What does African-centered Christianity look like? I believe I provided an example, and that would be Black Liberation Theology. Oftentimes, if you go to a church or if you visited a church in the African-American community that is a proponent or adherent of Black liberation theology, you tend to find, and I know I can recall seeing this as a child, a church where there's a Black Jesus, right? Now, that may be an issue of concern due to the fact that Jesus is Jewish, not Black, but we can understand why that was needed to be done because of the negative programming that comes from having a white Jesus, right? And having African people believe that God is white, right? So once again, family, hope you all can tap in, be part of the conversation. The question on the floor is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? Once again, this is the first video, first series in our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we're seeking to not only honor our Pan-African ancestors of yesteryear, but also do a deeper dive, right, and look to see what did they promote, what ideas did they actually engage in, or actions that they engage in that we can use today to make the world better for African people. So once again, family, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Also make sure that you hit the notification bell. You're watching, once again, a dual stream or dual live with LumumbaSpeaks.com. Of course, a Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, the B Line Network, the Pan-African Social Media Extraordinaire, and the home, keyword the home, of African-centered news and information. And so the question, of course, for the family is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? So once again, family, tap in. We've been almost going about 30 minutes. But I definitely want to hear from you all. Don't want to have to tap out too early, but if we don't have anyone tap in, then we may just have to do that. But once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. And of course, the question that I've asked is, is present. So definitely tap in, be part of the conversation. And let's just have a conversation regarding, is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? Keyword is today. Is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? Want to hear from you all regarding that issue, and hopefully we can get an answer. So once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. This is the first live of us in our Pan African Leadership Series, past, present, and future, because we're looking to review the life, legacy, and work of Dr. Mojola Agbebi from Western Nigeria, of course, and one of the earliest proponents of course, Ethiopianism. Okay, so Empress Love says, I'm on break right now. Appreciate it. And I can't think of a need for it today. So how about you tap in briefly during your break and share with me why you believe that there's not a need for African-centered Christianity today, right? So hopefully you can tap in briefly and share with us why you believe there is not a need, keyword, why there is not a need for African-centered Christianity today. Mr. Sandman, what's the word, brother?
Hey, what's the word? Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the subject matter at hand. I never read up any on the history of the guy. Can you give me a brief synopsis of his story?
Are you talking about Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi?
Yes.
Yes, sir. So yes, he was born David Brown Vincent in Western Nigeria, April 10, 1860. He was one of the leading and early proponents of Ethiopianism, which advocated for an African-centered Christianity. In the 1880s, as an indication of his embrace of African culture, he changed his name to Mojola Agbebi. In 1888, he was the founder of the Native Baptist Church, now known as First Baptist Church in Lagos, Nigeria. And later that year, he established the Ebenezer Baptist Church in that city. Agbebi was one of the first Africans to hold a degree in civil engineering from a British university. And he was primarily known for his missionary work in southern Nigeria and in Cameroon. Between 1890 and 1910, just a brief background, Ethiopianism is not really an ideology or a theological school of thought, even a political program, but it was rather a cluster of ideas and traditions about being Christian in Africa, right? That was shared by a group of African Christian leaders. These ideas and traditions focus on the history of Africa before European colonization. And there was a focus on using the name Ethiopia, Ethiopian, Kush, or Kushite in the names of churches. And there was an aim to create an African-centered form of Christianity based on the idea that Ethiopia shall stretch out its hands to God.
Oh, okay, I see now.
Yes, sir.
From my understanding, I don't know how much of this is true, but um uh the Bible itself, the scriptures itself, before they were written down in the scriptures, they were taught vocally, um through speech. What do you call that when they
It's
teach you?
about oral tradition,
Yeah,
maybe?
orally traditioned. And also, I also heard that those oral tradition actually come from East Africa. Those scriptures actually come from East Africa, but then they were finally written down and um
Well,
and then translated.
I don't know if that's accurate.
Okay.
And the reason why I would say that is because we see uh, some of the earliest. For one, we know that of course, the Bible that we know today, was part of the Bible that we know today, particularly the Torah and the Pentateuch, weren't written until the era of King Solomon, right? The time of King Solomon, right? So, but what I would argue, well, wait, there was an oral tradition where these stories were passed down in the Jewish community up until the time of King Solomon. Then they began to be written down, so on and so forth. But yeah, the question is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today amongst the African people?
Yeah, well, the I had brought that up because I was saying that I was under the impression that the original scriptures originally came from Eastern Africa and then they
No,
migrated to the Middle East.
no, that is no. That, and so that's part of the issue. Again, oftentimes people begin to falsify, history and try to make things African that aren't African,
Okay.
right? And that's one of the issues that we tend to find not only with Black people who adhere to Christianity, but also Judaism and even Islam. right? That the people start trying to say like, "Oh, this actually derives from us," and it's just not the case whatsoever.
Right. Well, yeah, that's an interesting concept. I know, um, like in the Caribbean, like in Puerto Rico, they'll take like some Yoruba religions
Hmm.
and integrate it with like Catholicism.
Yes, so we're
Like
talking about synchronism, absolutely.
yeah, I think they call it Santeria or
Yes,
something like
Santeria,
that.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, and that's similar to the Orisha or the Yoruba religions that they have in West Africa. They just integrated it with Catholicism, and I think the even the people in Haiti did something similar as well, where they were taking their indigenous religions and integrating it with um, Catholicism or Christianity or something
absolutely.
to that effect. But yeah, it's a interesting story. As a matter of fact, you remember Dylan Roof, that little white kid that went into the black church?
Yes, I'm familiar with Dylan Roof. Yes.
Yeah, that was a African church, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, it was the African Methodist Episcopal Church, I believe. Absolutely. AME, yes.
Yeah, African Methodist. Yeah. So as a matter of fact, that pastor, or not the pastor, but the senator that passed away in that church, I believe he's related to me because on my grandma's last name is Pinkney. So and she's also from South Carolina too. He's a senator out of South Carolina. So we was trying to do a little research to find out, um, were we related to him because he was one of the victims in that terrorist attack by the little white kid. But
Mhm.
yeah, it looks like yeah, it looks like we've been doing it here in the United States, and it's I don't know about the AMA church in South Carolina, how much they followed any African cultures, but I know that they called the church
The
uh,
African, yes, African Methodist Episcopal, absolutely.
yeah, African Methodist Episcopal Church. I don't know if they integrated it with like some Gullah Geechee tradition or something like that, but looks like we've done it in the United States and it's worked. But yeah, African centered Christianity on the continent. Hmm. Hmm. Well, they say
But,
that
but but it could be throughout wherever African people are. So it could be on the continent, it could be in the Caribbean, it could be here in the States, it could be in Europe, anywhere.
yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, here's the thing, because inside the Bible itself, and particularly the New Testament, where they talk about the life and times of Jesus Christ, um, there's no mention of the word Christianity. They call people Christians, but they don't mention anything called Christianity. Christianity was a man-made religion that
But yeah,
they made up.
all religions are man-made.
Right. But a Christian would be someone in definition would be someone who would be Christ-like.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're Christ-like, then and then the word Christ itself means the chosen one, you know. So yeah, I don't have a problem if you want to follow the teachings and the belief systems of Jesus Christ himself, because from my understanding, from reading the Bible, he was a morally upstanding individual. So yeah, it's fine to have that integrated. Um, I don't know if there's any part in the Bible where it says that if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your one and only Savior, that you'll be able to go to hell, that you will end up going to
There
hell.
are throughout the Old New Testament, Jesus states that I am the way, the truth, and the light. There is no way to the Father but through me.
But there's no mention of going to hell in the Bible, though, right?
Well, not explicitly, but the statement that he made various statements according to the biblical text that in order to make it to heaven, you have to believe that of course, you have to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and
Yeah,
only Him.
right. But there's no actual mention of going to hell. Well, the reason why I brought that up is because if you wanted to integrate it with like some African culture, African spirituality, and they
Hmm.
believe in other deities, then that would be like a contradiction in the teachings of Jesus Christ, who says that you have to accept me as your only Lord and Savior.
Well, yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah. It is a contradiction, but we as a people we do it anyway. So, but it
Right,
is, but if you're someone who's a stickler, that would be considered heresy, right? You would
right,
be acting outside of the um, accepted traditions and beliefs of the religion.
right. And they called Jesus Christ, they called him Rabbi. And a rabbi is a person who's a master of the scriptures. And as of right now, all the scriptures are being. I don't know if we have any rabbis that are, because the only rabbis we have now are Jewish people now, and they only translate or try to find the exact meaning of the Old Testament. They don't. They're not scholars of the New Testament. So if
Right.
you wanted to be Christian and have it integrated with African culture, then we would have to have a person who was a master of the Old and the New Testament, and then he would have to guide us, on how we would define that religion and how to follow it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess you would have to get like a pastor or hmm,
Well, I would
apostle.
argue you would have to get a scholar because most pastors aren't even very knowledgeable of the Bible. You want to be quite honest, right? I
Yeah.
would argue you would have to have someone who actually is a scholar, someone who's went to seminary, in my opinion, right, to be able to make an honest interpretation of the biblical text. Because typically, what we find is we have people who, because of their religious beliefs and affiliation, try to color the facts in a manner that promotes the religion rather than actual history.
Right. And another thing about Christianity would be um, a lot of the New Testament was came out of Greece, right?
Well, yeah, we're talking about. So one of the reasons why Jewish people don't accept the New Testament is because it contains Greco-Roman ideas and philosophies, uh, and part of that was based on the fact that the New Testament says that Jesus Christ was the Messiah, and according to the Old Testament, if you read the Old Testament, the Messiah, according to Jewish tradition and of course the biblical text, Max, I need you to cam up in queue just to make sure you're not trolling, and then you can turn your camera off, and I will bring you onto the live. Is that the Messiah in the Old Testament was a political leader, not a religious one. So that those are some of the reasons why it's not accepted. But once again, Max, I just need you to cam up in queue, right? Cam up in queue. That way I can make sure you're not trolling. Then you can turn your camera off, and I will bring you into the live. So if you could do that, that'll be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that would be another contradiction then, because um, Greek Greek history is in African history inherently, you know, and they even say that a lot of the teachers in Greece came from African culture to begin with. So we would be getting a knockoff of a knockoff, you
Well,
know.
no, I wouldn't. Yes, we do know that a lot of the Greek teachings come from Africa, but particularly when we talk about the Council of Nicaea, right? That is not something that I would argue you can make extrapolate as something that has an African influence. The Council of Nicaea, of course, which was led by Constantine, Roman Emperor Constantine, was made as a way to consolidate his power between, of course, the church and of course his power as the emperor of the Roman Empire. So I don't see the way a way that you can make an African influence when the goal was to consolidate the power of the imperial throne.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was after they translated the scripture from well the
Well,
the
real quick, Mr.
what the,
Sandman,
hold on, the New Testament wasn't, it was never in Hebrew, was it?
I do know that it was written, I think, in Latin.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, they say Jesus was a master of the Old Testament. That's why they called him rabbi. So I think that
Yeah,
those
well,
are
but rabbi oftentimes is used, of course, in Jewish culture simply to uh, give praise to someone that they consider a teacher, right? So you don't have to necessarily have been an official rabbi, but if people saw you as a teacher, saw you as an authority figure, you would be called rabbi.
okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So how did his church turn out? Did it how well did it work out?
Yo, that I don't know. I
Oh,
can be
okay.
quite honest with you. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I follow a couple African Christian pastors on YouTube. And there's one. It's difficult for me to enunciate his name. It starts with Paul. Starts with an A or something like that.
Okay.
And he's out of Nigeria. He has a huge congregation out there. And when he does his his preaching on Sundays, a lot of the topics that he brings up are things that are going on around in Africa.
Right.
So he'll relate the scripture to
The
the
issues that
activity,
black people are facing. Right.
the issues that
Mr.
are happening.
Sandman, give me 1 second. Matt Max, I saw you turn your camera on, but I need to see your face before I could bring you into the show. So once again, you're in queue. I need to see your face on camera before, of course, I could bring you into the show. Once again, we just want to make sure that you're not trolling. No shade to you, but this is just something that we do with everyone, just to make sure that we have no issues when we bring a person onto the live. Mr. Sandman, go right ahead.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it'd be interesting to find out what the results, or how did that turn out. I mean, because would you agree that the story of Jesus Christ, was that he was an upstanding, morally sound individual?
Yeah, I guess you could make the argument that the story of Jesus Christ makes that. I would just argue that there are a lot of holes in the story, right? And I mean, you have a story of his childhood, then it goes to age 30. So yeah,
Right. They
I
say,
mean,
hello.
yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, they said he went to Egypt to learn the Bible or something like that, right? Or learn
Well,
the
no,
teachings of the Pharaoh.
it was stated that yeah, it was stated that Jesus was taken to Egypt during his infancy due to the fact that the then, I believe, uh, governor of Palestine at the time was seeking to kill all engage in the killing of male babies.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
Androcide. Yeah, androcide.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that was the issue.
So how did he master the teachings of the old scripture? I mean, because every time,
I have no idea. I mean, because this is not something that's discussed in the Bible, so we don't know how.
hmm, yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess it's it has a lot of holes in it.
Yeah, it has a
Yeah,
lot of holes.
a lot of
There's,
holes.
there's nothing that says that he studied at a synagogue and he became nothing. And so it's like, I don't know. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of the issue. Max, I think what you're going to have to do is I'm going to have you leave and then bring you back in, and hopefully you'll be able to square your mic away. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. Literally, there's a lot of holes there. We have no idea. Yeah, but I mean, that's a good point that you brought up there. So in terms, and that once again, it really begs the question. So how do you have an African centered Christianity? Because you're still your core religious belief is based on the view is based in the culture, beliefs, and the ethos of another group of people, right? So how do you actually make it African centered? It appears based on the conversation we're having and just us trying to unpack that it seems like there's constantly going to be friction and a contradiction there. So I think we had some technical difficulties with Brother Sandman. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back in soon, as well as brother Max. Max, we know you're trying to tap in as well. But once again, family, this is the first live that we're doing in our series, the Pan African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we're looking to, of course, uncover, unpack, and of course, deconstruct the lives, legacy, and of course, practices of many of the Pan Africans of yesteryear, right? And so the goal is to identify and discuss their life and legacies and learn what can we do, what can we learn from them that we can utilize today to make the world better for African people. So once again, family, if you're watching a dual stream right now with LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home of African-centered news and information. So definitely want to hear from you all. Max, what's the word?
Can you hear me?
Hear you just fine, brother.
Oh man, hey man, great work, bro. I'm glad I was able to tap in and on the question because I don't want to waste too much time. I spend so much time trying to get on with the camera and all that nonsense. But the only thing I would say is that when you say should we change it to an African centered or a Christian or should we use that as a tool?
Yes, sir.
My thing is that haven't we tried that so many times and we haven't got anywhere yet? Like at this point,
Okay, all right, that's okay. I hear you. Okay, go right ahead.
At this point, when is it going to be? We're in like 2024. What are we going to do different? Because we've tried it, and then I would be all for it, but can someone say, hey, Jesus was a black man, and this is like it? Is there absolute truth and proof? And if there is, then maybe we can follow it. And I think people say that and everyone change it, but then it's just we've done the same program over and over and over again. Like what at this point do we really what makes us think it's going to work better than it didn't work a couple of years ago? And we were living in a better time in the sense where morally less distractions. Now we got so many distractions. We got reverends with gold chains, platinum. We got so much going on. Is that another, like we're stuck in a paradigm, like we're in a loop? We gonna go back to Jesus, a black Jesus? You know what I'm saying? At this point, what do we do? Like it's the same story over and over. And that's just my opinion. Not I
No,
don't know.
I think that's a good point, Sister Shy. Appreciate you, sister. Hopefully you could tap in and be part of the conversation. I understand where you're coming from, brother. I think that is a great critique. This is why we like to have people come on. Once again, it doesn't matter what your perspective. Right. We want to hear it. And you made a good point. You said haven't we tried this before? So let me ask you this question, because this has been tried before. I mentioned James Cone, Dr. James Cone, right, and Black Liberation Theology. We know Trinity United Church in Chicago, where the Obamas, of course, were parishioners, practiced a form of African-centered Christianity, Black Liberation Theology. Why do you think Black Liberation Theology or African-centered Christianity hasn't really helped the community on a macro level?
I think it hasn't worked because I think maybe the concept is a good concept. And I believe, I think we live in a power structure, and whatever group you set up, money's going to be involved. Politicians going to be involved. Everything that revolves outside of that just one base of African learning or Christianity is got to coincide with that one concept. So I think there's as we live in a capitalistic society. So once you see people galvanize into one thing, then the vultures come in. Hey man, okay, well, can you steer these people here? We're gonna give you some cheese over here. You know what? We're gonna come, so I don't think I don't think it can work, because I think it's still under the main system that controls everything. So we have to look outside of that, maybe get away from that. I don't know what I'm not saying we have to do anything, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think it just proven it hasn't worked, because then even in that structure, there's a hierarchy. And when that hierarchy, then of course, once you have a hierarchy, then it's not for the group of people. Now it's for the people that's on top to maintain a certain structure and place people in where they fit in. So I think that's why it doesn't work.
Got you. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully you could tap back in, brother Stan, man. Interesting. Interesting. So, and once again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I would make the presumption that what you're saying is that because of the nature of the church and the power structure that we live in, it's always co-opted.
Always. You got to get a 501c to get that, and then we go into the humanity of people, and then of course, this guy gets big. You got churches now, that fight against each other. Oh, my congregation better than my pastor better than, and then it never leads into the overall good of the people.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? It always leads to the one man, Mr. Chop Pork Chop. He good, and we do this and we give out some food over here and we do this, but then it doesn't translate into a overall plan to say, hey, 3 years from now, I want half of my congregation to have a home. 3 years from now, I want these kids to be going to college. 3 years from now, there's never that plan. It's just a reoccurring plan for the church overall. And if you follow these rules and the party, it's like a big party all the time.
Mm.
That's what I look at. It's like, oh, it's a party mentality, and this is the hottest club right now. The church is, we got the hottest club and we do these things. So it's like
wow. Okay. I've never heard that analogy, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah, we got the hottest club. Okay. Wow. Okay.
we the hottest record label over here. We sure enough Jesus, and over there's Hot Boy Jesus, and then over there's the money getting Jesus, and everybody. So it comes to a point where it never works, and we can never. I'm pessimistic in a sense. I think it's just, if we're talking about,
well, very quickly, I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't know if I would say you're pessimistic. I would argue that maybe you're being realistic.
Oh, okay. Because people say I'm pessimistic, and
I think and the reason why I state that is because what you just articulated is something that we've seen. This is observable reality,
right?
So that's not pessimism. That's being realistic. This is what is actually taking place. Not viewing the world through a rose-colored lens.
Right. So I don't know if another Jesus, another Haile Selassie, another king of Malcolm X, like all those things. It sounds good and we can use it for a motivation, but it seems like they're controlled motivations for a limited time, and it doesn't translate into an overall 5-year, 10-year. I mean, look where we at now, and politically how we're, what we're back. It just, if you pay attention to it, you're going to be confused, or you just go with it. Like they say, ignorance is bliss. If you like the Jesus, you like the Allah, you just go with it and just let Jesus take the wheel, as they say. But if you don't want nobody to take the wheel and you're trying to steer your own car, then it's like, man, which way you go? Because it's just it's kind of tough environment out here. You don't know who to trust. How many groups we've had and they've misguided and mistrusted people, allegations. It's crazy. it's a crazy reality to be in, to say that, okay, it sounds good, but how is it different?
Right. Okay. Once again, family, if you're watching a dual stream with LumumbaSpeaks.com, Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, and Bequine Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinary home of Africans in the news and information. This is the first in our series of shows, Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. And of course, we're looking at the life, legacy, and work of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi, one of the original practitioners and promoters of Ethiopianism, also known as African-centered Christianity. We have Brother Max with us. Where are you contacting us from, Brother Max?
Oh, I'm in Massachusetts right now.
Okay, shout out to the East Coast. Okay, good old New England. Very good. Are the Celtics going to repeat very quickly?
Man, I hate to say it, but I don't watch. But I'm not even into it. I didn't even know the World Series was happening.
Very good. No problem. So of course,
I watch boxing, but
you say that again.
I'll watch some boxing, but anything else sports wise, I don't really pay. I don't tap in too much.
Okay, I'm a huge sports boxing guy myself. So shout out to the marvelous Marvin Hagler, and of
The
course,
great, one of the greats.
yes, and of course, golly, who was the other guy from Massachusetts, Rocky Marciano. So shout out to them. Great, great all-time great champs. Rocky Marciano, of course, heavyweight champ, retired undefeated, even though he only had, I believe, 6 or 5 title defenses. And the guys he fought, of course, were past that.
Right. We gotta
Put the
always put that in
context there.
perspective.
Got to put the context there, and of course,
He ain't fight a whole bunch of champions.
Right, a marvelous Marvin Hagler. Of course, we know that he wasn't given his just due,
Right,
being overshadowed by Roberto
Ray
Duran.
Leonard.
Of course, Kid Wonder, also known as Sugar Ray Robinson. Of course, Tommy Hearns. However, due to the fact that he wasn't given his due, he actually went to court and legally had his name changed to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And we know he transitioned. He's with the Ancestors now.
Right,
but one thing we can say, if you ever watched him fight, he was marvelous,
right.
literally. So one of the all-time great heavyweight champions. Most reputable publications argue that he's the second greatest middleweight champion of all time, behind Sugar Ray Robinson.
Right.
And they put him above Carlos Monzon, who is a great champion from Argentina. So definitely want to give a shout out to, of course, the marvelous one, Marvin Hagler, great heavyweight champion, lineal heavyweight champion. And many people to this day argue that he did beat Sugar Ray Leonard in that historical fight that took place in Los Angeles many years.
I think they should have gave it to him, but I think he, when I watched it several times now, and I think from the magnitude he had to come in better. But when you look at the history, he was already out the game, and he was coming in back. So I think he already lost some of that. And I thought the game plan, he could have did it to make it convincing. He could have pushed it a little bit more. But again, I think Sugar Ray was more of the favorite of what they wanted to push.
Right. Absolutely. So once again, family, we're discussing, of course, should we embrace African-centered Christianity? Of course, we're looking at the life, legacy, and work of Pan-Africanists of yesteryear, and looking at what they promoted, what they articulated, their initiatives, and how we could use that to make the world better for African people today. And so, of course, we're talking about Ethiopianism or the concept of an African-centered Christianity. Is there a need for it today? Is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? That is the question. Of course, Brother Max says absolutely not. He says we've seen numerous iterations of this, and it hasn't brought about what you would argue are tangible results.
Right.
Okay. Very good. So want to know if we could get a dissenting opinion here, or someone wants to agree. I think one of the major issues I think that you highlighted, particularly in terms of the church, is this concept of set tripping, right? We almost see churches banging on each other, right? I mean, what the Prince told us is going on here, right? But I mean, and I grew up in a black church, right? And so I actually know what you're talking about, and it's unfortunate. Many would argue that it is actually antithetical to the values that are professed that a Christian should have, but it is a reality. So we even see personality churches typically operating around a personality cult. Call a personality around the preacher, the pastor, right? Which of course can be extremely problematic for a number of reasons, right? I would argue typically when a person is part of a personality called a personality, one, their perspective is based on that authoritarian figures' views, which is of course could be an issue of concern, but also there's typically an inability for a person to think critically and of course independently about issues. So there's a lot to, of course. Go right ahead.
But what's so crazy is that if we did do the African-centered Christianity and it's all one concept, how these churches can't become these 20 different churches? You can have them, but then y'all all can't come up with one idea, one one goal, one movement, one push. You could still have, hey, if you live in Brooklyn, of course you got to have your church in Brooklyn, you got to have your church in Queens, but it should be a collective, like, hey, we all on this one concept, one idea. Yeah, you over here, but when it's time to come together, we all come on one agenda. And I think that's one of the hardest things that a church or groups or any are able to do, and it just becomes just a solitary a point of just going nowhere.
Right. Good point. Once again, family, tap in. Want to hear what you all have to say regarding should there be a focus on implementing an African-centered Christianity. Let me ask you this, Brother Max. Is this your first time watching the show?
No. I tried to get on a couple of times, but I don't even know how this is working right now. But now I try to go on. I try to go on, but I could never get my camera up. So I think this time I was able. So that's how you let me in.
Okay, cool. Okay, no problem. But once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation here. We're discussing: is there a need for an African-centered Christianity? Is there a need for an African-centered Christianity? Tap in, be part of the convo here on Lumumba Speaks and Bequaline Network. So let me ask you this, brother. What are your political views? What is your political ideology?
Politically, I feel like it's the same thing, man. We're under something that has not worked. It's a, like I hate to say it, but it's like a matrix. You know what I'm saying? It's just it's a whole bunch of a constant loop of program where we've all transitioned. Every generation goes to this. It's the same concept, the same problem, the same taxes, the same. Oh, we're gonna take Social Security. It's the same concept the same game being ran all the time. And at a certain point, collectively, one of the things is that we can't solidify a one point or one group or one idea, or we can't even organize something to break out of it. I'm just looking at what I've seen, and it's just politically no concept at all, because how has it changed? How has it affected anything? You still gonna have to make the right decisions, you're gonna have to make the right moves, because there's no safety nets for anyone.
Right. So yeah, the question I'm asking is in terms of political ideology. Are you a Pan-Africanist, integrationist? Are you a Black conservative?
Man, I don't know. I don't think I fall in any of them. I'm into what's right for me, and what
okay.
staying away from the people, stay away from certain groups of people. I think at this point I'm more like, hey, you don't see anything real, so you just have to keep it real with yourself. You just stay on your real path. No group or affiliation.
Okay, no problem. Individual. Okay, very good. All right. So once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. If you're watching on Twitter, I see we have quite a few viewers on Twitter, formerly known as X. Well, X, formerly known as Twitter. I apologize. The link to the conversation, if you want to tap in, be part of the combo, is in the comments. So if you're watching on Twitter, if you look in the comments section, you can actually tap in. The link is there, and you can tap in and be part of the conversation. Of course, the discussion that we're having is there a need for an African-centered Christianity today? Brother Max argues that no, we've seen previous iterations of this, and it hasn't brought about any tangible results, particularly social, politically, economically. So if you disagree or agree, definitely would love for you to tap in and be part of the conversation. Once again, this is the first in our first live in our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we're seeking to, of course, review the life, legacy, and work of previous Pan-Africanists and actually unpack what we can learn from them in order to make a better world for African people today. So once again, we're really utilizing that Sankofa effect, Sankofa type concept or idea in terms of this Pan-African Leadership Series. And once again, this is the first, and I believe will be a year-long, keyword year-long, Pan-African Leadership Series. We know there have been numerous Pan-African leaders throughout the history, and so we want to give time here on our platform, Lumumba Speaks and Bequaline Network, to honor all of them. But once again, the question today, the $600 question, is there a need for African-centered Christianity today? And so Brother Max says no. If you're in the comments, of course, you can respond. Is there a need for an African-centered Christianity? You could put yes in the chat. You could put a no in the chat. Hopefully you can tap in and share why you believe that is the case. So let me ask you this, Brother Max. And I would make the presumption that you're not, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe you're not a fan of Christianity.
Well, I think the concepts. I think the concepts of all religions have some type of they all have some good, but I think it's just the system that the way it's used is just never going to work for it. Not saying I can't say never, but it doesn't hasn't worked, and I don't think it's made to work to galvanize people together, or especially when we say people of or so-called Black people are able to mobilize themselves and motivate themselves to get out of uh, the situations that they're in now. So, I mean, just with the concept of the African thing, it's like, even with Africa, we're not connected enough to Africa to even say African Christianity at this point. You know what I'm saying? We haven't
Well, I
even
think
gotten to that part.
we could say African centered.
African centered. So, we there's so many battles out here that now, I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Okay. Brother LMA, I see you're tapping in. What are your thoughts, brother?
Hey, Lamuma, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Man, what's up with these noon streams, man? You caught me at work, man. Shit, I gotta sneak away in a little corner somewhere so I can have this conversation because it's about to get crazy. I caught the tail of it. I think I understand the crux of your question. I'm gonna go ahead and say no. We don't need a African-centered Christianity. My main point is that even if you look at Christianity, I know you're not a believer, neither am I. But when I first walked away from Christianity, it was based off of a kind of a logic stand. Like the stuff just didn't make sense. And there's some scriptures and passages in the Bible that are kind of morally repugnant. So
Hmm.
wrapping that in kente cloth and then calling it Afric and then now it's good. I don't think that's a path that we should be taking. If you look at, because the Bible, in my opinion, is just a collection of kind of disjointed, just kind of collection of writings from antiquity. And it's just like, okay, some of it's good, but some of it's abhorrent. So, I don't think there's any reason for us to adopt it. Like I said, wrap it in, what I'm saying, give it a little do-rag and some Timbs and then call it Afrocentric and think that, and now we're cool with it. No, I'll have to say no. I think that, if you, and like I said, being an atheist, I have to look at all beliefs from a kind of a scientific, some type of lens from reality, right? So, yeah, I can appreciate a culture that may have deities, and the deities are just culturally based, that's fine, but like once those deities start telling you, okay, I have to hate this person or I have to hate this person or I can't do this, I can't do that, when logic and reason say that these things should be, logic, reason, and kind of a morality says that these things should be permissible, but I can't do it just because. So what I'm saying, I think that's just like, so for me, yeah, we don't need a African Christianity, African centered Christianity. I don't think so.
Okay. Once again, family, if you're watching on X, formerly known as Twitter, the link to the conversation is in the comments. So if you want to tap in and be part of the convo, you're more than welcome to do so. We have quite a few viewers on X, so hopefully you could tap in and be part of the conversation. Once again, or if you want, you could come on to YouTube, come to Lumumba Speaks or Beacon Network, and of course, we can have this conversation here as well. Brother Max, any thoughts regarding what Brother May had to say?
No, I totally agree. I mean, in this time, we don't need to put Gucci on it, because that's what's going to happen. We're going to do an African-centered church, and then they're going to Gucci it out, Prada it out, dashiki it out, silk dashikis, cotton blend, and we're running into the same we're running into the same this.
Go ahead, brother. Maybe having some technical difficulties.
Yeah,
Maybe
I can hear you, Lamont.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully, brother Max can, whatever that issue is, you can square that away. But yeah, I think you make a good point there, brother LMA. I think you make a good point. Oftentimes, I think when people think of course, Christianity, the thought is positive, and I think But as you stated, there are a number of morally repugnant aspects of the religion, particularly in the religious texts, that of
Yeah.
course are issues of concern. Many would argue that that's simply in the Old Testament, and that when Jesus came, died on the cross, became the Lord and Savior, that washed those things away. However, we do find even Jesus stating in
Yep.
the scripture that he came not to do away with the old laws, but to fulfill them.
Yep.
Yeah, we
So
might not
like
need another Lord and Savior.
Okay.
yeah.
that,
I mean, like I
that
said,
was a good one. That was a good one.
yeah, like I said, the whole concept. I mean, like I said, I got my issues with Bill Maher, but he said something that was kind of funny. He said we're taking our moral cues from people who didn't know where the sun went at night. You know what I'm saying? Like
That's a
these
good
guys,
point.
and there's not, this is not a knock against, so they just did not have the tools or the framework to look at the world so that they can come up, you know what I'm saying? They just didn't have the experience. So there's not a knock against them. They're just doing the best they could with what they had. But for us, living in the 21st century, like there's no reason for us to, like I said, we can appreciate it. We can appreciate the thought, the the thought patterns and what they thought and stuff like that. But there's no reason for us to hold on to it. It just needs to be in a museum somewhere. Maybe it needs to be on a television show under fiction, but to hold it as like something we need to live our life, and it kind of sucks because we can kind of see how, we all got family members or whatever, or just diehard, you know, uh, religious, either Christians or Muslims, and you can see it holding them back. You can see how they've, in my opinion, wasted your life. You know what I'm saying? Because now you couldn't look at the world for what it is. You had to look at the world from the lens of, some religion that was, forced upon you. Let's be honest. Let's keep it real. And now you're looking at the world, through this lens. And like I said, I've seen benefit from, the Creflo dollars. Yeah, he's benefiting from it. But the people who go to his church, yeah, they're not benefiting from it. So, like, no, get rid of it. Yeah, get rid of it.
All right. So listen, family, once again, if you're watching on Twitter, tap in, be part of the conversation. The link to the conversation is in the comments on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. We'll love to hear from you all. Want to see if we can get some pushback, right? I mean, Brother Max and Brother LMA, they're lockstep. They are 100% opposed to an African-centered Christianity. Definitely want to hear from some people who will make the argument that there is a need for an African-centered Christianity. So if you're watching, tap in, be part of the conversation. I want to hear, of course, from you all regarding if there is a need for an African-centered Christianity. Once again, this is the first in a series of lives that we're going to be doing on in our Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we're going to look at the life and legacy of former Pan-Africans from yesteryear, and of course, particularly the initiatives, the ideas that they push forward, and see if these ideas and concepts are able to create a better world for African people today. So once again, there is a rhyme or reason to why, of course, we're doing this leadership series. But definitely, as I said, I want to hear from you all regarding your thoughts on if it is needed and necessary. So once again, family, the link, of course, I'm going to put the link is in the chat on Twitter. I'm even going to put the YouTube link. So if you want to come on YouTube and be part of the conversation, if you're on Twitter, I will give you the opportunity to do that as well. So, Brother LMA, Brother Max, any other thoughts?
No, I think everything's been said, man. I mean, we just can't at this time, in this reality, we can't prove that it's gotten us better. We can't prove it. Now there might be some pockets where, some churches probably do some great things for some people, you know what I'm saying? But when you say that's more of like a micro thing. So if we're doing macro, it hasn't been able to transcend through the whole
Got you. So let me ask this question to both of you all, and this is just me playing devil's advocate here.
White devil's advocate.
Right, devil's advocate, right. Right. Appreciate you correcting me, Brother LMA. Keeping me on my square this afternoon. Snapshot reviews, I hope you tap in, I will look at your comment in a second. What about, you say we talk about that there aren't many tangibles that we find, but what about saving a person's soul?
I mean, you mean, well, a lot of religions, proclaim that they can save your soul. So why is it that, and when I say African-centered Christianity, this kind of goes for all of the Abrahamic religions. So, don't, hope the Christians don't feel like I'm, you know, uh, uh, singling you out. Is for all of them. But I mean, I guess we'll have to prove that whether or not we have a soul or not, or if we do have a soul, doesn't need to be saved. I mean, people say we're going to save your soul, but how do we know that we have a soul? If we do, how do we know that it needs to be saved? I mean, there's stuff you can do. Other organizations can help people. And I'm not against that. I want people to help and to enlighten, to educate. So I want that. I just don't think that Christianity can do it. And even if Christians are doing it, I mean, let's do an experiment. Let's have a group of people who are Christians and a group of people who are not Christians, and see if they're capable of doing good. And if you can do good without being a Christian, then what do you need to be a Christian for?
Gotcha. Let's see. Snapshot Review says, I don't think many people can deny that the story of Jesus is inspirational, and folks take time to Bible study. The issue comes with the imaginary assigned and the trauma of Black people dehumanization. So, but a snapshot reviews, SSR, I hope that you could tap in and really unpack and do a deeper dive in terms of what you're getting at there. But I think I understand where you're coming from. One of the issues that many people would argue is problematic is the fact that, once again, your deity is non-African. So you're automatically looking outside of yourself, outside of your own culture, as a way to seek salvation, right? So there's a lot of critiques that people have of Christianity, particularly from an African-centered frame of reference. But I think it's interesting that even, we still find people seeking to create an African-centered view of Christianity. I can recall that I had a student once who made the argument that Jesus was Black. This was in class, and I had break down why that, of course, was ahistorical, so on and so forth. But so it's a lot, and I think oftentimes, unfortunately, and I think LMA, you can speak to this, that what we tend to find happen is our people have, we become emotionally attached to these, once again, these inspirational stories, so on and so forth, that when you actually are confronted with actual history, you have a visceral emotional reaction. And oftentimes, if you go to, let me turn my camera on, just say you're a member of a church and you go to the pastor or a deacon or a missionary or someone who's in position of leadership, they actually oftentimes aren't honest with you. I can speak to this because I grew up in the church. They won't say, yes, what this person told you is historically accurate and that the Bible is ahistorical. They would say, no, these people are just enemies of Christ and you should disassociate yourself from them.
Right. It's a guilt trip at this point.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. Yeah. LMA, go right ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, snapshot reviews.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that. Going off what the brother was saying. Yeah, I believe that. From some of the stuff that I've read, that religion in general, it has more of a political use than it is for kind of spiritual. And I can't remember the name of the author, but he was an atheist, and he wrote about the purpose that religion plays, and religion does give community. But one of the things he was saying is, like, when, back in ancient times, most people would, how can I say it? They can trust their own tribe, right? Me and you grew up in the same
I'm sorry,
geographical.
Very, very quickly, brother LMA, just want to let you know, here we use the term ethnic group.
So is ethnic group the same as, I mean, because you can have, okay, well, I don't want to get off the point, but let's put it this way. Let's say you have an ethnic group, which is, let's say in a geographical area of let's say Nigeria, right? where DNA ethnically they look the same, but they are in separate places, and if they see each other, they tend to fight. So I'm trying to think of a political. When I say tribe, I'm talking about like a small political, social, economic unit that
Right.
does not. So I don't know
Well,
what word to use. I
I'm
don't think.
saying,
I
well,
don't think
the reason
ethnic.
why the first day of my master's program in African Studies, the director of the program, who was from Eritrea, he
Mhm.
stated that the term tribe is a pejorative term that connotates being primitive and lacking sophistication and, of course, civilization. Now, this was a term
Mhm.
that was used by colonizers as a way to dehumanize and justify the exploitation and colonization of African people. He stated that the
Right.
politically correct term was ethnic group or clan.
Okay, clan.
Yeah.
I'll use clan. Well, here, like almost like the connotation of clan means something else over here. So but I'll use clan. So let's say you have a region. Let's say just like relatively big, but let's say the size of let's say for you Cleveland, right? But you have a clan on this side and a clan on that side. They're genetically, you can say that they're the same, but socially and politically, they're at odds with one another. And the author was saying that religion can become a way of binding two clans together. Like even though let's say I'm dark skinned and you may be a couple of shades lighter, but if we both follow Islam or we both follow Christianity, then I can trust you. So it kind of gives you that little trust factor between uh, uh, um, separated groups or whatever. And I was saying that that's like one of the main reasons why, that was like, and obviously once, clans would, take over other groups, then it became like it was a forced thing. But you can kind of see that, the role that having a religion, a shared common belief amongst different groups of people can be beneficial. And that was like one of the ways that it kind of sustained itself and spread throughout, humanity.
Understood. Brother Snapshot Reviews.
Hello, everyone. Yeah. All right. I'm a Christian, but I'm a Christian as far as I've been christened. I don't go to church. I don't study the Bible or anything like that. But I'm aware of some of the stuff that's in it. I think that when it comes to the Bible and Christianity and stuff, I look at it as two fronts. There's one that's full of like all the mythology and stuff, and then there's the other side of it that gives you like life lessons and things that you can learn from, which it doesn't matter because the way these holy books are written, they're almost written in a way that anyone can pick them up, and it's designed in a way where you can see yourself in some of the passages or what you might be particularly going through. Now, if someone wants to tell me now the mythology side of the Bible, I don't really pay too much attention to. I'm not hung up on the doctrine around that, because if you're going to tell me that God flooded the whole planet, but he tasked one family to get two of every animal from the planet and keep them safe for 40 days, and you're telling me these animals didn't attack anyone, they were able to manage that, like practically that doesn't make sense. It no way it could have happened like that. So that side of it, that loses me. But when you look at Bible verses that talk about, say for example, managing debt, for example, saying things like, I think it's in like Proverbs where it just says like, do not like agree to like, put up like things for security if you lack the means to repay. Because if you are putting up your goods and you lack the means to repay, chances are you're going to put yourself in an even worse position than you were before you borrowed the money. So simple sort of like, and some people need it just to see it written down in some shape or form to give them some sort of guidance on how they can navigate certain scenarios. And I think in that context, it can be useful. My comment earlier, what I was trying to say was, just listening, and I guess the Jesus part does come into a bit of the mythology as well. So I might be a little bit of a hypocrite there, but the story of his life and stuff like that is inspirational for a lot of people. But I think the problem with the Bible, and especially for Black people and African people, is the fact that when they start to add the imagery of what they say Jesus looks like when you're looking at these stained glass windows and stuff like that, plus the whole trauma that the media portrays for Black people, and this whole thing about us being dehumanized and stuff like that, it's almost like this blonde hair, blue eye, or this blue-eyed white guy is the opposite of what you look like. So, and that's you're told is godly. So therefore, what does that say of you? I think when it starts to go down that lane and people, and it leans into like some of the trauma and some of the emphasis for self-hate, I think that's when it becomes problematic for people of African descent. But in terms of like just looking at just the plain text, in terms of like when you're in situations like choosing a good wife or avoiding like troubling situations, I think it can give some guidance, and I think that's where its value lies. But I'm not sure it's designed, well, it shouldn't have been designed to be a race tool, but unfortunately it got co-opted to be that way.
And so let me ask you this question, brother SSR, and I appreciate your perspective. I really do, because it creates for a better conversation when not everyone agrees. So once again, that's how I always say, that's why we want to have diversity of thought here at Lumumba Speaks and Be Quiet Network. I think you grow more as an intellectual and as a person when you're able to have your views and perspectives challenged in a healthy manner.
Okay.
So you talked about scriptures, talking about finance, choosing a good wife, a good mate, etc. The question that the pushback I would provide if I were to give an African-centered critique is,
okay,
we already have African concepts that address those issues. Why is it that a person, in doing so, you're looking outside of your own culture for solutions to issues that one would face in life?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't think, like, I can only talk from my perspective. I don't think that I'm necessarily choosing one one avenue to get these answers over another. One, we have to be honest, some of these African cultures or these African directions are not as easily accessible as finding out about or easily accessible as maybe it is to get hold of a Bible, because every year at Christmas time there's some Christmas movie about Christianity that's on repeat.
That's true, but yeah, but we know that's propaganda. But
yeah, we do. But what I'm trying to say is, it's more accessible in that way than if I need to go and look for something specifically African spiritual. I have to first know where to look. And I think joining your channel and stuff like that, obviously my experience is broadening out. I'm finding out new things and I'm learning new things, which I'm not closed off to. Okay. But one part of it is, and we have to be honest about it with ourselves, is some of these things just aren't accessible to the average.
I would agree. And yeah. I think we also can agree that is a byproduct of what? The Holocaust of enslavement.
Oh,
and colonialism.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think you read something on one of your presentations the last time we spoke, where it was this whole mission to quickly separate the slaves from their past as quickly as possible. I think.
Yes. So we're talking about Dr. Ali Missouri, his work. The Africans of Triple Heritage, we talked about this concept of contrived amnesia.
Yeah, and by the time you would have probably, like in the time of slavery, by the time you would have got down to like 2, maybe 3 generations deep of people who are born into that system that have no first-hand knowledge of freedom, first-hand knowledge of Africa, etc., you've already kind of lost a lot of that connection anyway. So I don't think it's a question about picking one over the other. I think it's about what is accessible to people is probably the main stumbling block, really.
Understood. Okay. Accessibility, right? But I agree with you. And this, of course, wasn't an attack on you personally.
No.
Okay.
I welcome the different perspectives, because how else are we going to learn?
Right. But we know that from a Christian perspective, the only perspective that you're supposed to be operating from is a Christian perspective. We even find in many Christian churches that there's a a repudiation of yoga because of the what Indian cultural influence.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, we find that that's pretty deep here in the States, right? So that, but once again, we don't want to get too far into the weeds.
I think beyond Christianity, though, I think there is this sort of international consensus that if it's not one of the three Abrahamic religions, somehow it's less than, or it's almost pagan, or it's almost something else, which we know is not true.
Well, yeah. According to those religions, if it's not, yes, then it's pagan. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think as well, though, we have to be open to. I wouldn't say necessarily prioritizing these other perspectives over our own, because obviously we're trying to connect back to who we are. But I think where it's applicable, we have to learn to be able to take what we can learn from other examples and put them to best use for us today. I think Malcolm said something like, whenever you're facing a problem and you don't know what to do, just look at the methods and practices that have been tried by people all over the world who've had similar problems to you. And once you work out how they got their problems straight, you can work out how to get your problems straight. And I think there isn't anything, it doesn't diminish your Africanness or your blackness if you are taking some learning or some education from some other sources.
Right.
I don't think so.
Understood. Any other thoughts?
Pan-African Leadership Series, past, present. Who was Dr. Mojola? I missed the beginning. So who?
Oh no, it's quite all right, brother. Quite all right. So yes, Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi was born April 10, 1868, David Brown Vincent in Western Nigeria. He was a leading proponent of Ethiopianism, which advocated an African-centered Christianity. In the 1880s, as an indication of his embrace of his African heritage and culture, he changed his name to Mojola Agbebi. In 1888, Agbebi was a founder of the Native Baptist Church, now known as First Baptist Church in Lagos, Nigeria. Later that year, he helped establish the Ebenezer Baptist Church in that city. Agbebi was one of the first Africans to hold a degree in civil engineering from a British university. And he was one of the, once again, one of the earliest proponents of Ethiopianism, this concept of Africans and Christianity. Ethiopianism came to fruition as a result of the racism that African people were facing in the Anglican Church in colonial Africa.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And so once again, he's the first ancestor that we're, of course, reverencing in our Pan-African Leadership Series, past, present, and of course, future.
What's your view on Christianity in general? Do you think it's a detriment, or do you think
LMA know my position?
Oh,
I abhor all Abrahamic religions.
Okay. And
if I could, one of the reasons why I have such a adverse and negative view of Abrahamic religions, and really I would even argue a lack of respect for Abrahamic religions, is because these religions have no respect for African people.
Sure.
And that we find in these religions, and we did a show on this. If you go on the platform and you go on our playlist, we even have different playlists where we have a whole section on Abrahamic religions where we talked about and actually showed people, of course, on our platform the history of anti-Blackness and Abrahamic religions from their inception.
Yeah.
Right. From their inception, right. Mm-hmm. And throughout the years. So we're talking about from a classical antiquity, the medieval era, and even, of course, in the contemporary world and society that we live today.
So when you, because you got some Black people who are like, I think they call themselves Hebrew Israelites.
Yes, sir.
That would still come under the term of Abrahamic religion, right?
Yes, sir.
So what do you say to them? Because I'm sure they would argue that it doesn't dehumanize them. I don't know. Does it? Like?
Well, yeah. I'm glad you asked that question. My brother is a Hebrew Israelite.
Okay.
Yes, and of course, one of the issues is, this is like a form of African-centered Judaism where they're trying to, falsify history and make the claim that they're actually Jewish and all type of ridiculous stuff. But what we have to focus on, and I'm a big proponent of this, and Mr. Wright, I see you just tapped in, so we're gonna get you in here in a minute, is actually focusing on history, actual history, right? And one of the reasons why we find a lot of black people seek to try to say, oh, the Bible is about black people, or Judaism is about black people, Islam is about black people, is one, because they have an unhealthy concept of what it means to be black or of African descent, and two, because they don't actually know their own history. So they seek to adopt someone else's. And I'm not even the original in this position that I'm taking.
Sure.
The brother who wrote the book, the ancestor who wrote the book, Destruction of Black Civilization, Chancellor Williams, and he may not even be an ancestor yet, so let's not say that, but the master teacher, Chancellor Williams, talks about this in his text. And I'm paraphrasing, but he argues that when black people don't know their own history, they would try to Africanize someone else's.
But see, the thing is, with religion and history, there's a waters are being muddied here, because some things in the religion aren't necessarily proven to be historically as something that actually happened. It's just, and I think a lot of people don't know how to separate the myth from what is actually happened and what is actually practical. Because there isn't, like, for a lot of people that are mentioned in the Bible, there isn't actually any archaeological proof that most of them people exist or wherever
Exactly.
it actually was. But do you think so? So what's your stance on like Rastafarianism and stuff? Because that does have some similarities to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Rastafari, you can make the argument is
Abrahamic.
So it's Abrahamic, and is also African inspired. So once again, one of the things that we found, particularly amongst African people here in the Western world, during the death, decadence, and destroyer of chattel enslavement, is the synchronization of traditional African religious beliefs with, of course, Christianity. On the continent, we find that synchronization typically being traditional African religious beliefs with Islam, right? And so many would argue that Rastafari is really like a African-centered derivative of Christianity, or an African-centered form of Christianity.
Do you think it takes away from that African spirituality then?
You know, I mean, there are some aspects of African spirituality. You know, we talk about Nyabingi. I've been to a Nyabingi type of a ceremony or event. You know, of course, in the Rastafari, Haile Selassie is considered to be God. There's the belief that he isn't dead, but is still living, right? Yeah. And so, of course, you can argue is a abstraction of the story of Jesus, right? So there's a lot there. We know Marcus Garvey. We talk about Marcus, you know, Jesus being foretold by John the Baptist. Many argue that Marcus Garvey and Rastafari, Marcus Garvey is considered a prophet, and he foretold of the coming of a king coming out of Africa, particularly Ethiopia. And so we see that type of connection.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. But actually, you know, I have a lot of literature on Rastafari. At one point in my life, I identified as a Rastafarian.
Okay, let me just ask you one more question before you move on to someone else. So there apparently is an Ethiopian Bible that is the oldest version of the Bible.
I don't know if I would say it's the oldest version of the Bible.
It's older than the King James version.
Right, but it is older than the King James version.
Yeah, which is what most Western people use.
Right.
But with that being an Ethiopian Bible then, and I'm imagining it, I've never read it, so I'm imagining it's got things in there for Christians and Christianity. Does that then take away from African religion? Like, is that then seen as an African pure version of it, or is it that it's, because I'm not sure that these things are supposed, because I don't think the Bible itself, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I don't think it necessarily mentions race. I know it mentions nationalities and different countries
and ethnicity, things of that nature. Yeah. But of course, it doesn't mention race, because race wasn't even a concept back then.
Yeah, or does it mention ethnicity? I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I don't think because they're designed.
Yeah, it mentions ethnicity. Yeah,
because they're designed to convert people to their cause. That seems to be something that would alienate people.
Well, Judaism doesn't seek to convert people.
Yeah, that's true.
Just Christianity and Islam. But to answer your question, so there's a couple of things. One, I'm familiar with, you know, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. I've visited the Ethiopian Orthodox Church on occasion many years ago. And so if you're talking about really an organic form of African Christianity, it would be the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And it looks very different from I would argue, the European Christianity that we find African Americans and, of course, most brothers and sisters on the continent in the Caribbean practicing. And I use the term European Christianity to distinguish between the forms of Christianity that's practiced by the Ethiopian people, and of course the Christianity that most African people practice, which is a derivative of what we were taught by our oppressors.
Because the King James version has taken books out of it, hasn't
it? Yes. The other issue, and we even find that even with the Council of Nicaea, so we go far beyond King James. We talk about in terms of the process of canonizing what books would be in the Bible and what books would not. And of course, we know and I'm glad you brought this up. Typically, if you go up in church like I did, and Mr. Wright grew up in church as well, I don't know if he paid attention as much as I did, but I was kind of forced to by my parents, is you're taught that the books in the Bible are put in the Bible by divine revelation. You're not taught actual history in which there was actually people, scholars, theologians, and political figures that sat down and said, these books will be in the Bible for this reason, these books will be removed. So once again, we talk about, I would argue, that anti-intellectualism, where you're not being taught actual history, but you're really being given religious fairy tales. Now, back to Ethiopia, what we find is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in their Bible has, I believe, 84 books, not 66 like the King James Version, but it also had the Kemba Nagast, which tells the story of course, King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and how the emperors all the way up until Haile Selassie were the Solomonic line. With that, Ethiopians make a distinction that what Jewish people are not Ethiopians, they're not Africans. They make this distinction in the Kemba Nagast. I've read the Kemba Nagast. I even have a copy behind me, but behind my right shoulder. So we find even there that there's a distinction, and Ethiopians make it very clear that Christianity was brought to Ethiopia in the 4th century.
And so is it established that the Queen of Sheba and the King Solomon or whatever, that these are real people that actually lived?
Well, that is the story. Once again, this isn't something that has been substantiated, but it is the story that was given and passed down from generation to generation, that the emperors of Ethiopia, from Haile Selassie going back, because he was the last of the line of emperors that came from the union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba.
And do they note where the stories of the Bible came? Because you said it was brought to them. Did they make mention where it may have come from?
Yes, they mentioned that it came from Israel.
But Israel, as we know Israel today, isn't the same Israel as in Israel in the Bible.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was still in the same location. Of course, it was a smaller nation. It was much smaller than the nation state of Israel today. But yes.
Oh, it was in the same location.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it was in the same location.
Because I've been going around saying that Israel only was created in 1948 after World War II.
So no, well, we're talking about we're talking about the nation. As a matter of fact, when you read the Old Testament. The Messiah is prophesied to be a political leader that will restore the sovereignty of the nation state of Israel. Like if we go back and we look at the time of King Saul, King David, King Solomon, their kingdom and the capital was in Jerusalem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll let someone else.
Yes. Mr. Wright, go right ahead.
Hey, what's going on? I'm a little late to the party. I would like to know what is being discussed.
Yeah, so the conversation we're having, this is the first part of our series, the Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future. And so, of course, we're looking at how Pan-African leaders of the past, particularly their lives, legacies, and the ideas and concepts that they promoted can be used to make a better world for African people today. We're citing the work and life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Mojola Agbebi, who, of course, was from Western Nigeria, and his promotion of Ethiopianism or the concept of an African-centered Christianity. So the question that we're asking is there a need for an African Christianity today for African people throughout the world?
That's wow. That's a very loaded question there. African-centered Christianity. I don't think I have a response to that, because I think I want to sit back and listen, because I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question.
Okay, Brother LMA, Brother Max, and of course, Brother SSR, if you all would like to share your thoughts and bring Brother Wright up to speed, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I think for myself, my answer was no. You can probably go back and rewind and see it. Yeah, my answer is no. For me, I think that there were some. Just to recap, there were some passages in the Christian Bible that, you know, beyond just take away the fact that, you know, Christianity was forced on to us by through slavery. There are some passages in the Bible that I find to be abhorrent. Um, and I don't think that we need to Africanize them. We don't need to throw a kente cloth on them and call them African. Um, if there are some particular passages that the average Black Christian is fond of, then you can kind of take that, you know, take a little piece of it with you. But I think that the entirety of Christianity, well, Christianity for Africans, you know, this kind of goes for all the Abrahamic religion. We just need, what did John Henry Clark say? We need to throw them into the garbage bin of history. We don't, I don't see that it's done us any good. Some of the stuff in there is abhorrent, and we don't need to uh, claim that there's some more, you know, some virtue just because it's, you know, wrapped in Christianity. So that's my point.
Can I chime in 1 second? Can I? If
Go ahead.
okay, Black people, you know, globally, if we disassociate with any Abrahamic religion, what will it be replaced with?
That's the $1 million question right there.
Yeah. For myself, as an atheist, I would like for us to not replace it with any type of excuse me, I'm eating, I'm in the middle of my lunch. I would like for us to, you know, at least, you know, maybe adopt some type of humanism or something like that, where, you know, we can develop senses of morality and philosophy. You know, disconnect. We can come up with these without the influence of any type of supernatural being or supernatural force. I think we have enough technology. We have enough, you know, philosophy. We know, you know, we have enough world experience that we can come up with our own philosophies without, you know, having to invoke any type of supernatural being.
Just
Okay.
following on from what LMA just said, do you think, LMA, do you think that the philosophy of Pan-Africanism could be a religion in itself?
I define religion. There has to be some type of supernatural being. Now, if you can have a version of Pan Africanism that's your worldview or that's your philosophy, because I
Yeah.
separate philosophy from religion.
Okay.
So if you want Pan Africanism to be your worldview, your objective, your philosophy, that's great. Honestly, I think that will work great for us, because I think that we as Black people, we need to have something that centers us. That kind of, cause that's the one thing about. Okay, yeah, I gotta have to leave soon. But that's the one thing about religion, is that it kind of holds us together, right? You'll see people who, generally speaking, don't get along with one another, but because they both see each other as Christians, or you hear people say, "My brother in Christ," "My brother in Islam." These people have nothing to do with each other, but because they share the same religion, they kind of let down those barriers, and they kind of can work together. So, me
Yeah.
personally, I would like to see that, you know, like a Pan African, where it's just like, okay, even though I'm an Adolf, I'm a Black American over here. If I adopt Pan Africanism, and where are you from, brother? I can hear an
Um,
accent, okay,
yeah, yeah.
UK accent.
I live in the UK, but my family are like from the Caribbean.
Right, right. So, you know what I'm saying? And then you got a brother from the UK. If he believes in Pan Africanism, then we can work together. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I would rather have us have something like that. So that, you know, because obviously, you know, just because we're both Black, we both share melanin, you know, doesn't necessarily mean we'll get along.
Yeah,
I think that we have more to gain working together than we do being separate. But,
absolutely.
you know, I think that that will work. But like I said, I just personally make a divide between religion and philosophy.
Yeah, it seems like if there was like I don't know if there's a better word for this, but like if there was some sort of code that just had, and it just needs to be one or two core principles that we can all agree with. So it doesn't matter if you're from the Caribbean, it doesn't matter if you're from the United States, or you're from Brazil, or you're from the continent. There's just one or two, no more than that, core like tenet that we can all agree on, and then we work together on those two principles. And then however the landscape looks different for you in America, you may adapt a few extras to work with your community over there, and however it looks differently for me in the UK, I might work with my community here to work on that. But those one or two core elements is something that binds us all across the diaspora. But I don't know what those two things would be.
I agree with that. Um, uh, until recently, when I'm talking, maybe a decade ago, I realized, as Black people globally, we have been dominated, from a religious perspective. These religions were forced upon us to the point where, like the gentleman mentioned before, it became our identity, right? So, we never learned to put our Black African ancestry first. We never prioritized that. If you take a look at the Jewish community, um, they put that in the forefront of everything. Okay, Judaism is prioritized over anyone. So they kind of have it's kind of their religion, but it's kind of their race too. So as Black people, I think Pan Africanism can be something that binds us together, right? The whole religion aspect, though, I think in terms of Black people globally, some people are just going to do what they want to do, whether they're Christian, whether they're Muslim, or whether they're Hebrew Israelites. And I think, those tentacles are strapped on tight, right? So I think in spite of that, we can be Pan African.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe not, because to be Christian or to be Muslim is, in a sense, is anti-Black or anti-African. So how can you be Pan African and support these type of religions? Dr. Umar Johnson, he came out recently and said, Islam is anti-Black. So it's kind of a catch-22 to an extent. It's kind of a catch-22 because there is no organized dogmatic religion that, as Black people, that operates as an institution, right?
Yeah.
Christianity is an institution. Catholicism is an institution.
Yeah.
Right? Islam, Catholicism. I said Catholicism, but these are institutions.
Yeah.
Black people, we've never had an organized dogmatic religion that operates as an institution. So we have to have that conversation as well, right? This is globally.
Yeah.
But at this point, we're talking, hundreds of years, thousands of years, right?
Yeah. And it depends on if people can learn to leave their religion at home. Because I think Malcolm said something very interesting once. He said something like, we have to learn to understand that my religion, or he was saying his religion with Islam is something completely different to the Black fight struggle. And Martin Luther King's relationship with Christianity is something different to the Black struggle. You're not catching hell because, I think he said something like, I'm not catching hell because I'm Muslim, and you're not catching hell because you're Christian. You're catching hell because you're Black. So if we could put those differences, leave those differences at home between you and your God, but when we come together, we're squadding up on the reason that we are Black, and we have to have these one or two things in common to actually help us move forward. But I don't know. It depends on the religion the person is following. I'm not sure if people are willing to put their religion second and their Blackness first.
Well, brother, SSR, I appreciate what you had to say. I appreciate what Brother Wright had to say as well. But based on what the religion says, doing so, putting your race first and your religion second, is a sin. Because per the religion, your religious perspective, your religious mind is supposed to come first in every single facet of your life.
Well, then, then it
right. So we find, for example, individuals like a Dr. King, like a Malcolm X, who didn't take those positions, but they oftentimes were repudiated by the religious community for doing so, for putting the issues and perspectives of African people, irrespective of where we were in the world, first, rather than the religion. So, for example, someone mentioned the concept of brother in Christ or brother in Islam. Well, for example, Malcolm X, he was taken to task by the Islamic community, the Ummah, for what siding with African people in the issue between Tanganyika and Zanzibar. Right? And they were like, but the people in Zanzibar are Muslim and you're siding with African people. What the hell? He said, well, I'm a Pan-Africanist first. I'm African first. He got a lot of flack for that. Because that doing so was in contravention of what the religion promotes, right? So if you're fighting for the liberation of African people, right? You're a soldier in the army of African people, but you're not engaging in jihad for what the Ummah, the Islamic community, once again, there tends to be a contradiction.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think at this point we need to take the mental pilgrimage back to, you know, Pan-Africanism, to what we believed in before we became Christians or Muslims or Roman Catholics, right?
Yeah.
I think Brother Lumumba, you mentioned before with me that you know there was an African-centered spirituality before the Abrahamic religions came, correct?
Correct. We did a show on that Sunday, Introduction to African Religions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, and I can see the effects of, being in, living in a Western world and being dominated by a race that's not yours. Their philosophy, their religion, their way of doing things supersedes ours, right? So we never really learn who or what we are. So, all this time we've been, our laws, everything is based off of Christianity. So, the problem is that's not who we are as a people. We worship in the God that don't looks like us, right? You can make the same argument for Islam, but as Black people, we truly don't know who we are. Most of us don't. We have no idea, and that was the whole point of colonialism. Give them the Bible, give them the Quran. This will make someone a better slave. It's easy to conquer someone, when they believe and worship a God that don't look like them. But for so many of us, we go throughout our lives and we never question it. We never even question it. I never questioned it, right?
Yeah.
I went to church. My parents, they piled me in church, me and my brothers and sisters, right? And, every Sunday we worship in a white God, and we're not even really dissecting the Bible at all.
Hold on real quick. Just for you all who don't know, Mr. Wright is my cousin, blood cousin. His father and my mother are brother and sister. And oftentimes, well, on occasion, we will be in church together. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so when he says what he's saying, I know it's true because I experience it in my household as well.
Yep.
I think you find that a lot of people that are in the church don't actually question what they're being told. It's almost like, oh, just leave it to God and he'll sort you out, sort of thing. And they're not actually really thinking about what they're practically doing,
I agree,
or what they're doing. But I think, just to go back to one of the points you made, Mr. Wright, about falling back into Pan-Africanism and stuff. What Pan-Africanism, I think, really needs to do is get some W's on the board, because one way that we galvanize people to this movement and what it can do for us is when they start to see it actually producing something tangible that's of benefit. If we look at like the Jewish community for as an example, they might tell their kids, for example, World War II, the Holocaust happened, and loads of our people got hurt and killed and all that kind of stuff. But and I'm just leaving the modern day politics out of this for the moment. I'm just using this as an example. But even though this horrible atrocity happened to us, there's a country called Israel out there in the world, and if any of you ever feel unsafe, you can go there and you can live, and you've got something, and they've got something to balance that trauma off against that is positive for them. And I feel like with us, we haven't got anything like every year, like here, because it's October here, so we're just going through Black History Month, and it's what you typically expect to see: slavery, this, slavery, that, blah blah blah, nothing else beyond that. And it's like young people that I come into contact with, they don't want to know about all of that anymore. They want to know about how can I prosper, what can I do to help me fulfill or live the best version of. They're not saying that exactly, but you know what I mean. They're aspiring for things, but there isn't any infrastructure that my generation or the generation before me has put in place for them to tap into. And I think that's where we're falling down. We can have these conversations, which I think are fantastic and they're really good, because how else would I get to speak to you or Dr. Lumumba or LMA? But we actually have to start thinking about what we're doing offline and what we're doing tangibly to start getting some W's on the board. Because when we're talking about these religions today, everyone who's following their own religions, like the Sikhs, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Jew, they get something out of their religion, something tangible that they can use, build upon. And I think that's what we need to start thinking about. How can we get some W's on the board as soon as possible?
And brother,
Much agreed.
SSR, I agree with you, and I've always said that one of the reasons why these religions have such a strong pull on our people is because there's actual physical institution you could go to.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I know the Hebrew Israelites are probably a bad example of this, but like they will talk about how their religion is the true Judaism, etc., etc. But once again, what do they, apart from standing on the corner yelling at white people, what do you have to show, or what do you have that you can plug your son into, your cousins into, your, do you know what I mean? I've always said this. If a billionaire from Africa came to where I live in the UK and said, I want to invest in the Black community here, there is absolutely zero infrastructure for us to plug this man into. Nothing.
I agree with you because, brother, you're right on point. If you take a look at the Jewish community, um, you mentioned Israel, but you can even see this play out even in America or even in Europe. They have their Jewish community centers, obviously the synagogues. They send their children to the Hebrew Academy, right? They typically have Jewish functions where their young people can come and fellowship with each other, and if they want to date and meet each other and they marry, they have a place where they can go, where they can do that. I think the point that you were making was so good because as Black people globally, we don't really have a lot that we can organize and be part of institutionally. And but I think Pan Africanism is definitely a start because just the fact that we're having this conversation, right? The fact that we're having these conversations, we're yanking off the yoke of colonialism, right? So you have to realize we've been dominated for centuries. So it's a process for us to change our way of thinking, and then we start doing different things institutionally in North America, South America, Europe, even on the continent. Right? There's a correct me if I'm wrong, cousin. There's a place in Ghana I think you visited recently. Um, I forget the name of it. It was W.D.B. Du Bois, a
This
center or
W.E.B. Du
something.
Bois Center for Pan Africanism.
Right. That's a great place to go to, learn about Pan African culture, fellowship with other people that think like you, may even meet a spouse there, right? But it's a start.
Yeah.
But if you take a look at the Jewish community, like you said, there's benefits from them networking and being a part of their religion, and right, they do business with each other. It's very known. It's very well known that Jews, they do business with each other. They bounce money off of each other, right? They control the banks. Apparently, the media. I mean, these people are well networked, right? Look into the history of where they got their fangs in New York City, right? Um, they have a lot of political influence. I mean, these people, they're very ethnocentric, We
And
should,
you
and the
know,
reason why I bring up the Jewish community because they have a history of having a negative relationship with Protestant white people as well. It's not the exact same as ours, but it's on the same street, right?
yeah,
And their response to their oppression or is much different from ours. Okay, it's much different,
mm,
and we can go into a lot of things with that. But I think as Black people, you know, I think a start would be controlling the natural resources on the continent. If you take a look at a few African countries, I think it's Mali, Burkina Faso. A lot of them they're kicking out the French. They say, "Hey, we want to control our own natural resources. We don't need you.
yeah.
We can find these natural resources ourselves. We can put these natural resources on the global market ourselves."
Now the thing with that is their next step now needs to be how can we make sure that we can survive outside of this system we're now being frozen out of? Because I think I read something the other day where the international the so-called international community are trying to make it so that people from Burkina Faso, I think it is, cannot get visas in their countries if they wanted to go abroad to work, or they're like putting on sanctions on the country, but the sanctions actually hurt the people. They don't actually hurt the government at all or anything like that. And I think this is where Pan-Africanism needs to up its game, because if we can find some way to circle the wagons so that when these nations are making these moves, they can learn to trade with each other or even trade with us in the West in some sort of way where it allows them to be able to be self-sufficient off of the grid or off of the main established way of doing it, so that they can do these things. Because otherwise it's just going to repeat the same thing that happened in Zimbabwe, where you've got people that have learned to grow crops for generations, but because the international community has now cut them off, suddenly they can't get into the markets that they would be usually selling in. And that's when other African nations, the Caribbean, the communities in America, the communities in the UK should be still buying their things so that they can somehow think. But I just don't think the Pan-Africanism is quite there yet in order to
Yeah.
accommodate and facilitate that. But one last thing I will say, because just following on from what you were saying about the Jewish community, one of the things that they do really well is that they vet and they kind of gatekeep who gets involved. Because what I noticed with a lot of Black people over here is that we'll build things that will be great and revolutionary and the next hot thing, but then we just let everyone else get involved.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We let everyone else take part. But if this thing was created by another community, there'd be a hell of a lot of barriers for you to go through if you were to try to get involved. But whenever Black people seem to be setting up things over here, we just make it too easy for other people to get in. And once they get in, all of a sudden, it's not the same thing you created anymore.
Yes, that's correct.
You
I
know?
agree with that. That plays
Gentlemen,
into.
real quick. I gotta get back to work. It's been a great talking with you guys.
Yeah.
Great build. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll be on the next live. Take care, guys.
All right. Take care, man.
Have a good one.
Appreciate you, brother Ellen, man.
Yep.
Yeah. I just think we just need to think about how we get some W's on the board and how we can show the wider community or the younger people, because there's a lot of Black people that don't even know about Pan-Africanism or even really think about it. But
Yes.
yeah, we just
I
need
agree.
example.
I agree with you because the last point you made plays into multiculturalism. A lot of our young Black brothers and sisters we're believing in multiculturalism instead of putting Black African first, prioritizing that first over everyone else, because any program, any benefit that was created to help Black people, is for everyone now. And usually what happens is we end up with the short end of the stick,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, it's too easy for them to latch on to our movement, our cause, our programs, So, and I noticed that with a lot of youngsters, is that they embrace, Black and brown people or,
Yeah.
people of color.
Yeah.
Well, what is that? That has nothing to do with us. We need to be very specific. We need to do things for us. And as me, I'm Afro American. Obviously, growing up, we never learned to prioritize our race or our ethnicity. Right? We never learned that.
Mm.
And this is something we need to unlearn, this BS of putting everyone else first, right? Prioritizing everyone else, being multicultural. I don't believe in multiculturalism. I just don't. um and because oftentimes, like I said, we usually end up with the short end of the stick. But the Jewish community always prioritizes their ethnicity over everything.
Yeah.
So this is something Black people, we have to learn to do. We have to learn to do this. We have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's becoming very serious because the world is becoming multicultural.
Mm.
And when the world becomes multicultural, it's going to start to heat up in terms of fighting for wealth, resources, assets,
Yeah.
equity, um, you know, any type of tangible benefit whatsoever. It's going to become more fierce. You have to compete with people socially, politically, economically.
Yep.
It's not just about being a good person. This is a fight. We are not the same.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah. What I've started to notice in the last couple of months is where my fiance lives. That you got like places like McDonald's, KFC, Nando's, all those kind of restaurants, and they must be franchises, is what I can assume. But in the last 6 months or so, all of the staff there seem to be staff from East Asia, all of them. So, what would be a job that a 16 or 17-year-old fresh out of secondary school would go to do like on a Saturday is now taken over by a lot of people that are from a particular community, and it seems like they're only hiring those people. Now, I know those jobs aren't necessarily jobs that a lot of people would want to make a career of, but when I was coming up, that was like a typical weekend job that a teenager could do just to get a little bit of pocket money in their pocket. But now, if they not going to be able to access that at such a young age, they're already being uh, out competed out of that market because that's a recruitment avenue that they're no longer getting, and there isn't a Black equivalent to compete against that.
right. That's a great example. You have to compete with people, you
Yeah.
know. And oftentimes we know no one prioritizes Black over their own racial group. That's
Yeah.
history shows you that. That's just not how it works. So we have no allies globally. We have to put ourselves first. If we don't, everyone's going to put us last.
Yeah.
Okay. But this is one of the poisons of multiculturalism that's being pumped down our kids' throat in the public school system. Now we talk about immigration. That plays into immigration as well. I support Black immigration, but I don't support immigration of non-Black people. I don't have anything against them politically or personally, excuse me.
Mm.
But once again, like I said, we have to compete with these people.
Yeah.
Um, and you look at the point I was making before with multiculturalism, and particularly America or Europe. It's going to become more fierce. It's going to become more fierce, and it's going to become more complicated.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of, as Black people, with our history in these Western nations, racism and so on and so forth, we want to represent everybody because we don't want people to get done like how we got done historically. But
Yeah.
we need to take a step back and really, analyze our actions. Like, what do
Yeah.
we support, and for what reason? Okay.
Yeah.
um, because it's becoming very fierce. And like you said, I like the point you mentioned about in Burkina Faso, and I think it was Mali,
Yeah.
and they're starting to say, hey, we're going to operate our own natural resources. And you see some European countries starting to deny visas for a lot
Mm.
of people from these countries now. So, um, we have to figure out a way how we can be self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency should be our main priority.
Yeah.
As Black people, African people, we've survived a lot. We can survive anything, but it's much more than just survival. We want power.
Yeah.
We want power.
Yes, power. That's the
We
thing.
want power.
Yeah, and that
That's
is
what we
power.
want.
And that is power economically, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially. That all the avenues of productivity. That's where we need it.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I think for the Black UK Caribbean community in particular, not necessarily the Africans, but the Caribbean community, we are less than 1.4% of the general population, and the majority of the men in my community date outside of their race. And with that comes with, I mean, don't get me wrong, people who are mixed, I see them as black until they tell me otherwise. So like I've got cousins that are mixed and stuff like that. I don't treat them any different to my other cousins at all, right? Yeah. Unless they say, I would rather identify as something different, then that's fine. That's up to you. But I think when you have and you guys can debate me on this if you think I'm wrong, but I think when you have a community where the majority of the men, because I do still think that communities that thrive in this Western system are communities that are led by men, but when the majority of the men are not invested in the community, i.e. looking to procreate with another black woman, another, do you know what I mean, someone of the, they don't necessarily have to be another Black Caribbean, it could be an African or just a black person in general. That's when that community is going to start to, in the next 1 or 2 generations, just really start to fizzle out. I think it's a wrap for us, but maybe the Africans can help us bring the balance back. But
real quick, Mr. Wright, you stated self-sufficiency. You talked about that, but there are some Christian pastors that would argue that self-sufficiency would never work. That trying to be self-sufficient is something that is antithetical to being a good Christian. I want to play this clip for you all, and then we can unpack.
Well, they do say that God helps those who help themselves is a common thing.
Right. So let me play this clip.
Welcome.
And I'll tell you this, if you let Jesus come into your house, before he leaves, it'll all be right. If I am poor and blind and wretched and naked, turn away from your own self-sufficiency. Too many of us think that we're going to make it to heaven on what we've got. They believe that if they think positively, if they get better from day to day, that somehow, miraculously, they'll be prepared to go to heaven based on what they have done. Self-sufficiency will never work. Jesus has the only life that can get you there. But then Jesus broke every stereotype and came walking down your street one day and came to your door and knocked and said, "May I come in?" He knows where you are.
He sees you when you're sleeping.
If you live on the streets, if you live under a cardboard box that's put on top of a grate so that heat comes up and keeps you from freezing, he knows where your box is. And he'll knock until you let him in. And by the time he leaves, you'll have gold, you'll have garments, you'll have eyesight, you'll have everything it takes to have eternal life. And all you've got to do is let him in.
That's interesting.
Thoughts, family. Thoughts.
Right. Now, there are clearly some preachers or pastors or whatever his title is that will benefit from having their flock or their congregation in a certain position so that they can continue to get that collection plate money each week, right? They can't have too many of their congregation thinking or being self-sufficient. But then it's like, well, why do I need to come there? And a lot of the older women in my family do it. They'll go to church on this hope and a prayer that something's going to happen because they just put their faith in. They'll take matters out of their own hands and put their faith into something divine that it might help them, not knowing that actually if God helps those who help themselves, that means you've got to actually put in some tangible effort to turn around. I don't know what that is, but that's not me.
Okay, Mr. Wright, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think that's that clip was a microcosm of the Christian church, in particular the Black community, right? Self-sufficiency is frowned upon. You're supposed to believe in a higher power, right? Uh, God is going to make a way for you. God is going to do everything for you, right? It keeps you dependent on the church, right? Just like the brother said, it keeps you dependent on the church. So, you know, they can pass that collection plate around, and you'll be. It's basically prosperity pimping, basically. Pimping from the pulpit, right? That's the whole point, is to take advantage of Black people. Okay, why in God's name would he think it's a bad thing to be self-sufficient, right? Because they want you to be dependent on the church. The church is a huge detriment to the Black community in today's society. Maybe not 100 years ago, but today, definitely. You see the wealth and resources being funneled out of the Black community and into the Christian church, right?
Yeah.
These people are making an ungodly amount of money, right? If you go just about any Black community, any inner city in America, on the predominantly Black side of town, you're going to see a church on every corner. A church on every corner, damn near. Some of them even have 2 or 3, right? Right next to abandoned buildings,
Yeah.
right? That could be turned into businesses. But that pastor, he collects his money from that collection plate, right? And some of these people are struggling. And you take a look at what he's driving. He's driving a Benz, and he goes off into suburbia with your money, right?
Yeah.
He's not even teaching his congregation the principles of Christianity. That's what they say they believe in. Obviously, I don't support Christianity, but at the very minimum, if you're going to say you're a Christian, you can at least practice the religion. You don't teach them the Bible, right? The average Christian doesn't know anything about the Bible. They don't know anything about Christianity. They don't even know the origins of it. So it's a farce from top to bottom, from beginning to end. And this video clip is 100% proof that their whole intent and purposes is to take advantage of Black people in particular.
And it's a certain age group that also go to church, isn't it? Like it tends to be like the old. Well, over here it tends to be a lot of the older people, and not to like stereotyping that, but a lot of them are quite vulnerable in terms of like
Right.
they will hand over their money even though they probably haven't got enough for themselves, or
right. Well, even in the older
Right, let me ask you this question. You stated that you and I'm going to misquote you, so please forgive me. You stated that you're not a fan of Christianity, or you don't like Christianity, or you're not a practitioner of Christianity. Why is that?
Well, this took place, I would say, over the last decade, after I'd done my independent research and my independent studies on the origins of Christianity, how we as Black people in the Western world came in contact with Christianity. You guys mentioned earlier the King James version of the Bible. I've done research on that as well, and all of these things played into why I decided to disassociate myself with that religion. The name that they told us of Christ, Jesus Christ, there wasn't even a letter J around, right, during the formation of the Bible, so his name couldn't have been Jesus. That's another one right there. All these things played into that. And then you talk about, worst of all, why would me as a black man of West African descent worship a God that doesn't look like me? And on top of that, he's the image of my oppressor,
Yep.
the colonizer,
Yeah.
the imperializer, the people that have dominated us for hundreds of years. Apartheid, slavery, segregation, you name it. Why would I worship that image? Doesn't make any sense at all. If I'm going to worship a God, he's going to look like me.
Yeah.
I'm the complete opposite of that. So if I worship that, I have to hate myself. I have to. I have to think of myself as something negative if I'm going to worship a God that not only doesn't look like me, but is responsible for all the suffering my people have been through for generations, right? So there's no way in hell I would call myself a Christian. Okay,
I would
that's just the way.
presume, based on your emphatic answer, that you do not believe that we should practice a African-centered form of Christianity.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Now, how do we wake up more people to that way of thinking? Because I got into a debate a couple of months ago with an African young lady who was really just accusing me of trying to, throw some racism into the religion when it's not really there. And I'm trying to say to her, look, this Jesus guy, this Obi-Wan Kenobi look-alike, if you're sitting there praying to him like he's God, then what is it saying about you? Because you're the opposite of that. But she just, and this is an African girl, a proper African girl, like, don't say proper, like, you know what I mean? Someone born from over there. And it's just glazing over her like I'm speaking another language. Like she hasn't even made that connection for herself.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well. I used to work security in a church in Atlanta, and the church was predominantly South Sudanese, and the other side of the church, there were two churches going in one church building. The other side was Congolese, but we used to have these discussions because, I told them, hey, I don't support Christianity. And they would ask me, why don't you support Christianity? Do you worship the devil and this, that, and the third? So we have these discussions and they were like, well, and it wasn't anything too deep. The only issue I brought up was, hey, why would I as a black man worship a white God? So they're like, well, why do you keep harping on this race thing?
Yeah.
You're a racist person. What does that matter? It's just all about just believing in God. So, they want the smoke, so I'm gonna give it to them. So we went into, the history of Christianity, how it was established in the Western world, and it just became a long battle. And the point that you made, brother, it's to a point where a lot of our people don't want to hear it. Even if you put the truth right in their face, they don't want to see it. They turn their back on the truth. So I think this issue, it's like a glacier. The tip, you see the tip, but under the water, it's a lot there. As black people, we hate ourselves. We've been trained to hate ourselves from the beginning, from the way we were raised, from what we see on television that's promoted to us, what we learn in school. You brought up the interracial dating thing or marriage thing. I mean, that plays into it as well. A lot of us think, hey, if I'm in a relationship with a non-black person, this is progress. I'm doing good. I'm supposed to bleed out my bloodline.
Yeah.
So it comes from every angle. We have to do a whole process of decolonizing ourselves, and the religion part is just one piece of it. I mean, this is a huge problem, and you talk about where do we begin? I mean, you can make an argument. We can begin in a lot of different places because, um, for someone to worship a God that doesn't look like them, you have to hate yourself. You have to.
You see,
Or what's that?
now this conversation that you had with the Sudanese community, they are obviously a community of people from the continent. And what I've started to notice a pattern of is that people from the continent that may or may not have had the same kind of interaction that people from outside of the continent may have had with Western people, or like white people particularly, is a total informs their outlook in a different way that is things that we can pick up on certain nuances that they don't. And it's almost like what I've kind of noticed is that, and I hate to really do this, but the people that have had their lineage through that transatlantic slave trade have a different view on when they see a white Jesus and that versus the people that were on the continent with him. I don't know. Sometimes it just feels like they're a bit more. But then I say that then, but my grandparents were like really. They didn't have it when we were trying to say to them that Jesus probably wasn't white. But I don't know. There just seems to be like. I don't think they understand the struggle like we understand it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't think. I think they kind of feel like, like they would say to you, "Oh, why are you making this about race?" Just like the young lady said, "Why are you making it about race?" They just don't see. They just don't see the Western imperialism the way we see it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've had Afro Americans make the same argument as well. Also Jamaicans. I had a Jamaican buddy. He made the same. He outright told me, in my church, Jesus is going to be white, not black,
Oh
and he's
wow,
from Jamaica.
wow, yeah,
So this problem is global with us, and then you know, and I think it's just, I think from top to bottom, we have to decolonize ourselves mentally. That's the first step. We just have to be proud of who we are, from the very beginning. We're not even raising our children properly and, having respect for our identity, our culture, our ethnicity. If you don't do that, your child will be more susceptible to this type of brainwashing, because that's what it is. It's brainwashing.
yeah,
And the first thing they did when we got off those slave boats, they gave us the Bible.
yeah,
Okay. So, and one of my buddies that I talk to quite a bit, he's from Angola, and we talk about this. But just being a black person, you know, that has experienced colonialism, right? You're going to have a negative view of who and what you are compared to the dominant racial group,
yeah,
right? So we know Christianity is a white religion. Okay. Catholicism is a white religion. Where do we fit into that equation as black people? Where do we fit into that?
yeah,
We're always going to have this, what's the word I'm looking for? We're always going to have a complex, right? We're always going to have a complex. We're not going to feel like we measure up to being white. We have to do more to overcompensate, So unconsciously, I think we raise our children with a complex from birth,
yeah,
right? And then practicing this type of religion, we reinforce that. I wouldn't even put my child in the public school system, because they're not going to teach your child how to be a strong black person. They're not going to teach them what they need to know about their race, their culture, and ethnicity. But going back to what I said before, the Jewish kids in the Hebrew Academy, they learned that.
yep, yeah,
Right? They
yeah,
learn a Jewish-centered curriculum
yeah,
based on their race, their culture, their ethnicity, and their religion.
yeah.
Trifecta.
Last year, I visited a school not too far from where I live, and it was a Sikh school, and this school was founded by the men in that community. The teachers are all from that same community. They're all Sikh. There's no way in hell and even though they teach the national curriculum, there is no way in hell you're telling me that a Sikh boy is coming out of that school and he doesn't know who he is. He isn't proud of his heritage. And if it comes to the point where he's just about to leave school and he doesn't know what he wants to do, or he doesn't know where to go to get employment, the men in that community will circle around him and help work with each other to find him something or to help him get into something. And there just isn't a black equivalent. There just
No,
isn't.
used to be, but
Yeah.
um,
We used to have Saturday schools here that used to teach us all about black history and stuff like that. And that would be somewhere where on a Saturday you can go and get that cultural nourishment, that sort of like knowledge and stuff. But the guys that were running it, bless them, they were funding it out of their own pockets. And a lot of the adults in the community just weren't helping them out. And obviously they could only go for so long without because it's not something the council was going to fund or anything like that. They could only go for so long before they had to stop it. And it's one of those things where, as an adult, I really now value all those Saturdays I used to go there and stuff. But our own people aren't. If you can't expect other groups to do for you what you don't do for yourself, and if our own people aren't funding our own institutes or our own improvement, then what's going to happen? You know,
I agree with you. That's a true statement, brother. Yeah, and the thing of it is, it should start in the home, right? It's not even being taught in the home.
Yeah,
so we're not even getting the first base.
Yeah, but the majority of parents, they probably don't know some of this stuff themselves.
They don't know themselves. You're right.
And when you don't, it's a bad stereotype, but if we're assuming that some of them aren't necessarily there financially, they've got other priorities that they need to be thinking about rather than thinking about history and all that sort of stuff, because they've got to pay their light bill, they've got to get their council tax paid, they've got, you know what I mean, just all this other stuff that, you know, if there was a bit more prosperity, we'd have more time to do.
Yep. Well, you can make the argument that even when we do have, you know, we're in a good place financially, we still don't teach our kids these principles.
Yeah.
That is true. And the fact of the matter is, you know, I want to be a little personal here. I grew up in a home, 2-parent home, right? We lived in the inner city majority of my life. And then when I went to high school, I went to a predominantly all-white suburban high school.
Okay.
And experiencing this type of environment. The city I'm from is Dayton, Ohio, born and raised 937. It was such a huge culture shock for me that I didn't know how to respond to a lot of issues that I faced in this type of environment. I was a football player. My head coach on the football team was making disrespectful, microaggression, passive aggressive comments to me on a few different occasions. You know, I didn't fit in with the team. I didn't fit in with the student body. My grades suffered. It was just now. I wouldn't make the argument that I shouldn't have been there in the first place. Some people will make the argument, but that's fine. But my whole issue is, why wasn't I taught about race? Why wasn't I taught about my ethnicity, my culture? Okay. Why wasn't these things taught in the home? I think it would have been better just to learn these things. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that felt this way, because I know a lot of people that were in situations like that, and they face these issues. Because when you're young and you're Black, all they teach you is love everybody, praise white Jesus. Now get out there. And, you know, oftentimes we see, you know, kids of different racial groups and ethnicities, they're being taught in the home, hey, put your own people, your culture first over everyone else. This is your game plan. This is what you're supposed to do. So when these kids, they're off into the world, right? They're not in the home. They have directions on how to navigate and do certain things. As Black people, we don't have any directions, no navigation. We just lost, and we got to try to figure out how to get there on our own. You imagine someone, okay, they have complete directions on how to get to point A to point B, right? And you're just trying to figure out on your own without any directions, navigation at all.
Yep.
You're probably going to get lost.
Yep, absolutely. People learn from 3 different directions, is what I've come to understand. You learn by someone setting an example, you learn through experience, or you learn as a consequence of some action. And most of the time, that consequence is not anything positive, because you've done something and you learn that way. And so many young Black guys learn as a result of consequence. And if you just had that, someone that's just got that little roadmap just to show, they don't have to fill in all the gaps for you, but just give you that general sort of guidance, you'd be able to walk more upright with your head up, so that you know when those microaggressions come, how to check it effectively.
There you go.
And you look
exactly
like you're crazy for doing it. Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. But it's just there's just a lot of knowledge just missing. There's such a blank spot in our psyche that I don't know what we do to fill it. It's either I know a lot of people, like say like Dr. Lumumba himself, will probably, you know, likes to go back into history and learn certain things from certain other cultures and stuff. And I don't know how far back we need to go to learn what we need to do to propel forward. But then there's another argument for, well, maybe we just start creating something new and try and go from there. I don't know what the answer is, but you know, whatever we can do to nurture this, I'm going to call it an African-centered consciousness. We need to start putting some tenets in place or something to just help guide our people a bit.
Oh, you know, you said something important. You said African-centered. Even with a lot of our people, especially in the Western Hemisphere, we view something African as something negative.
Yes, yeah, that is true as well.
We view something African as something negative. This is programming, right?
Yeah.
This is programming that we learn to, you know, like my cousin always says, racial deference, to view what you are as something negative and something white as something positive,
Yeah,
you know? So how in God's name can you be what you are and be proud of it and be successful and prosperous if you view that as negative?
yeah.
This is a huge problem, and you wonder why. We can fall in line with something like Christianity, a religion that's anti-black. We can fall right in line with that, or Islam,
Yeah.
because we already hate ourselves.
I mean, there are people even in my own family that if you mention the term African, they think it's something that's negative or something that's nothing to do with them and stuff like that.
That's very common.
But when you go on the continent or when you look at who's over there, there's people from all over the globe that ain't seeing anything negative in being in Africa or doing business on the continent or anything like that. We got a lot of work to do on ourselves, man. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, man, because you know, a lot of especially black people in the West. I'm only going to say the Western Hemisphere. You know, the Western world, whether it's America, South America, or Europe. Sounds like you're from the UK, right, brother?
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, you experience a lot of the same issues we do as well. You know, what was the point I was going to make? I can't remember the point I was going to make.
Was it about African-centered consciousness?
Oh, yeah, African-centered. You know, the first point I was going to make, like I said, we view anything African as negative, but a lot of African people, black people that's in the Western Hemisphere, we don't view ourselves as African. We don't. Trust me, I've had several arguments with a lot of brothers and sisters about this, because we look at ourselves as something completely separate from that.
Yeah.
Because we live in America, or we live in Brazil or Dominican Republic or Cuba.
Yeah.
You know, or Canada, whatever. But we look at ourselves as something completely separate from that. So our allegiance is with those particular countries and not with our brothers, sisters on the continent. So, you know, we can never connect there, right?
Yeah.
But if you take someone that's Jewish or someone that's Chinese, okay, you know, someone that's Arabic, you could put them anywhere in the world and they know where their allegiance is. Doesn't matter. Even there's variations of Jewish people. You have Sephardic Jews, you have Hasidic Jews, you have Ashkenazi, you have Orthodox Jewish people. They know, hey, we are on the same team. Our homeland is Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're all on the same page.
Do you think the label black throws up a barrier that disconnects us with Africa or saying African? Because, and the reason I say that is because if we think about it properly, no one is a color. Like, you know, like, all right, you hear people say like white people, but they only mention white people when it's of reference to black people. Do you know what I mean? Like a white American is not saying I'm white American. I'm American, or like over here, I'm British or I'm English is what they're saying. They only refer to, and even like Indians and stuff like that. I've never had an Indian person call himself a brown person, but I hear this label black and brown because it's only used in reference to us. So, and I think, and Dr. Lumumba, you can correct us if I'm wrong on this one, but I would imagine before our ancestors were captured from West Africa, I'm not sure that they were calling themselves black. I'm sure they would have
No, of course not.
whatever.
Before you can make the argument before Europeans circumnavigated the globe and dragooned the world. People identified primarily by their ethnicity and nationality or their religious belief.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I don't know if that. I know some people are quite sensitive about the black label, but I just wonder if that causes some sort of barrier between those people that don't want anything to associate with African, even though they could trace their DNA back to it, and that helps them form as though there's something else, which is what slave people probably planned to separate us from the continent. I don't know.
Well, I've definitely seen that play out in Latin American people of African descent in Latin America for sure, because even though they have a significant amount of African blood, it's almost an insult to consider them to be black. But in North America, we were labeled black from the beginning. So it's different because the typical Afro-American, I'm not talking about us, but I'm speaking in general. A lot of Afro-Americans, if you say, hey, you're African, we would consider that to be an insult. I'm not talking about me, but most Afro-Americans think this way.
Yeah.
So what we have here, basically, anything that's closer to Black African, okay, is something you kind of want to distance yourself away from. And this is the way a lot of us have been socialized, have been programmed, okay, engineered, whatever you want to call it, brainwashed, because, we've experienced so much colonialism, imperialism, just domination from, not only the white race, but any non-black person. This is the type of, this is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Okay. As black people, that's why I was saying earlier, we have to decolonize our brain if we want to do anything, because for so long, you have to realize any and everything we consume is not African centered.
Yeah.
You realize what I'm saying? Whether it's the media, whether it's from a religious perspective, whether it's from education, being in the public school system, okay, anything. It doesn't come from an African place. So, like I said before, a lot of us, we think being with a non-black person in a relationship is progress.
Yeah.
I got a buddy of mine that I've known for almost 20 years. He thinks this way. He thinks being with someone black is something negative. He's a black man himself. He thinks being with a non-black person is getting ahead in life.
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, well, how would you explain that person being with you if you think that non-black person is enriching your life, raising your social market value as a human? Wouldn't they be going down being with you? And he didn't have anything to say about that. But I think a lot of black people, we suffer from this. We have a very negative disposition on who and what we are. Anything African, we don't want to learn about it. We have no interest in it. Well, I'm American. I don't know nothing about that. Well, like my cousin always says, you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree itself, right?
Exactly. But it also prompts me to think about, like, when people say, like, if we've now adopted the term black and that's separated us from identifying as African, but the term black isn't connected to any lands in the world. It's not connected to any institutes or anything that helps that community prosper, because there's nothing for it for itself. When people use the term "I'm proud to be black," what does that actually mean?
Well, it was created to, separate the black race from the white race in the Western Hemisphere, right? To keep power and wealth and resources into white hands and not black hands. Because you have to realize, in North America, the scientific definition of racism basically, is basically we were rejected.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were cut off from who we really are. So
Yeah.
they had to replace that with something. We replaced that with black now. You're just black. That's what you are. So
Yeah.
we're kind of stuck between two boats. So we're American, but we're not white.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're black, but they don't consider us African. So it's like, well, we don't really know who we are. And they sure as hell not going to teach us.
Yeah.
So the whole racial thing, and you take a look at the second layer of that, the one drop rule, right?
Yeah.
To if you have any form of black blood in you whatsoever, you're rejected from the white race. Once again, this is to keep power, wealth into white hands and not black. So if you have someone white that's breeding with someone that's black, okay, even though that child is mixed, it's legally is considered a black child, rejected from the white race. Okay. Um, all it is to keep wealth and resources into white hands and not black. That's it. That's the whole point of it.
Oh wow.
So this is what the questions I ask people that say, "Hey, we're all human. We're all the same. I just look at that particular person. Skin color doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter." I ask them these questions.
Mm.
Okay. Yes, it does. It matters a lot. Okay. So as black people in North America, it's our responsibility to study African culture, not only on the continent, but in South America, in the Caribbean, okay, Europe as well, right?
Mm.
Because we're over there too.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to learn about our identity and our ethnicity and our culture, not theirs.
Yeah.
But let's not pretend here like, you know, we were brought here and everything was just equal and we're the same as everyone. No, 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 that's not the case at all. We were the ones that experienced um, a lot of domination,
Yeah.
colonialism,
Yeah.
imperialism, segregation, apartheid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been the ones that's been on the receiving end of these things globally. So we're gonna be the ones that have these issues,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So it can't just be I look at everyone as the same. No black person should ever say that.
Yeah.
Okay. No black person should ever say that globally.
It's true, and like you said, like your friend is the person that would say that is what I see when I look at a lot of the guys in my community because they and I think it is because they are dating outside of their race. They see
What
everyone as well, just human, not knowing that actually you're being you actually do get treated differently, or you don't, and they try to ignore it like it's not happening, but they
well,
know that.
absolutely. It pacifies you. You can
Yeah,
never be African or black centered. You can't. Your frame of reference has to include other racial groups of people because you're in a relationship with that person.
yep,
You're compromised. So this is why these things could be, very dicey. It could be very confusing because, and a lot of times, we don't like to admit it, but a lot of us that are in relationships with these non-black people, they get disrespected, they get mistreated,
yeah,
you know, and a lot of times the black person is the one that's, desperately wants to make the non-black person accept them.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
this is usually the case.
Yeah,
Let's just be
absolutely.
honest here.
Yep, yep. I've had loads of my friends tell me stories like that where they've gone over and met their partner's family and
Yeah,
like the dad's just ignored them or not
yeah,
said anything to them. It is mad.
yeah.
Another story was there was a girl that I was working in a school and I just got talking to some students and one of the girls was a young mixed race girl and she said to me sometimes at school when it's like Black History Month and stuff, like it's almost like the teachers expect me to like know loads of things and they're always asking me questions when they're doing certain subjects and everyone in the class looks at me as if I'm supposed to know the answer and I don't know. And it really hit home for me that her father, because it's the majority of the relationships over here are black guy, white girl, what white wife or white mother of the child, or whatever. The dad ain't putting any black culture into his kids. into
Right.
his kids, because he is trying to, like, say, be a little bit pacified, just be a bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and then
He shrinks himself for the white woman.
yeah,
You see black women do the same thing, and I
mm,
guarantee you, that non-black person, it doesn't have to be just white. You
mm,
know, they've disrespected this black person on several different occasions. They, you know, said called them racial slurs. How do I know this? I've had friends, you know, that my buddy, the same buddy I talked about, he told me the same thing. Yeah,
yeah.
his non-black partner called him the N-word. Okay, and he didn't have too much of a problem with it. So I mean,
Yeah,
what type of a person are you where someone can racially degrade you and you can sleep in the same bed with them?
yeah,
You know,
man.
you have no respect for yourself.
And what
And
I mean, if your kids see that, what example is
yeah,
that? And it's just like, yeah, how? Because I've seen some of these guys put up with some disrespect that they would never put up with from a black woman.
yeah, never, ever put up with that, and vice versa. I've seen black women do the same thing.
Yeah,
You know, and be publicly and go public about it, talk about it publicly. These type of things.
yeah,
And you know, the reality is you can't respect yourself as a black person if you're in interracial relationships. These relationships are about power. They're about power. These
mm,
other racial groups don't respect you. Okay, they thinking to themselves, "Hey, I can't get with someone of my own race, but I can always go down and get me someone black, and they'll be happy to have me." Let's just be honest. This is the reality of the situation. They know you're beneath them. Now,
I've seen, yeah, because I've seen examples. And I know I keep saying black guys because that is the majority over here. Like, a lot of the black women are in relationships with black guys, but over here, a lot of the black guys are in relationships with non-black women. And
really
I've
quick,
seen,
brother, I got to get off here. It was
yeah,
good talking.
yeah, you too, man. Yeah.
I'm gonna come back on another time.
Yeah, I've got to go as well, actually, to be fair. But yeah, thanks for the chat, man. You gave me some really good insight.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I learned a lot.
Yeah. All
I
right.
appreciate everyone tapping in. Definitely. This is a great conversation, and look forward to you all being back on Thursday at the same time, same place, same channel, the Lumumba Speaks and Bequaline Network, where we'll be having our second, of course, a video on our series on Pan African leadership, past, present, and future. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Always bet on black. Peace.
Peace.
Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on black. Peace. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on black. Peace.